It is tea time. We have various things to talk about. We had a big balance patch, especially Firebrand getting reworked. Lots of things to talk about in that regard. And of course, we have a challenge mode. Challenge mode, Old Lion's Court. It died very quickly.
Again, I think that the reason it died so fast is because mechanics were pretty much the same as the normal modes. So everyone that was like preparing already knew the whole fight, basically. Like if they just hadn't released normal modes 3 weeks before, then I think that the CM clear might have genuinely taken a little bit longer.
I think let's talk about the balance patch a little bit. It's a little bit of balance gaming. Firebrand. The age of the Guardian is over.
Worth noting that we've gotten more balance patches in the past 4 months than we've probably gotten in the past 4 years. So I think that part is really nice, and it gives me a lot of hope that, like, even if right now DPS Firebrand doesn't really feel all that great because it feels very one-dimensional, they're going to continue looking at it, and they're going to continue adding ways to make it feel better and better.
Something I've also noticed
I'm here.
with these,
Yo,
hey,
Sneb on headset mic, bro. We have arrived. And there's no Sneb. I'm going to tell you why, guys, actually. There's something that I'm sorry to report this. But another guest who is potentially going to join the show today was actually going to be Nike. And Nike said, no, I can't come on because Hammer Spellbreaker, the second skill, actually has not been fixed. It does not work. You do not get the bonus damage all the time against bosses. And he was so distraught by this that he actually took Sneb with him and just dragged him off the show, smashed him, obliterated him, right? And, you know, actually backbreaking him, right? It was like a massive CC on that Hammer 5, and that's it. That's what we lost 2 guests, I'm afraid. But anyway, here we are.
You found guests who don't play Warrior instead.
Exactly, yeah. And that was the other thing. Nike said he would get so toxic that I would get banned, right? Because Spellbreaker hasn't been fixed yet, or the Hammer hasn't been fixed yet. So, no Warrior players. This is a Warrior-free stream. Don't worry about that. And we're going to have to start banning the Warrior mains. Okay, they are the new Fire Wizards, right? Previously, it was Fire Wizards. But actually, as we'll soon find out, Fire Wizards have no reason to complain about this patch. What an intro. But anyway, welcome, friends. It is tea time. We have various things to talk about. We had a big balance patch, especially Firebrand getting reworked. Lots of things to talk about in that regard. And of course, we have a challenge mode. Challenge mode, Old Lion's Court. It died very quickly, but it was still fun. And actually, I think we can probably start there actually with the challenge mode itself. A little mini topic, a little warm-up topic, as it were. And I actually really like that fight a lot. It's not the hardest fight in the world, and I was a little bit disappointed. And partially, this is a very interesting thing that we're definitely going to start seeing a lot with future strike missions. Actually, is that the guilds that were kind of going for it and were preparing for it actually prepared a decent amount, right? I think that the guilds, or the guilds that cleared it early on, went in with a plan, learned about the mechanics, right? Actually understood the fight. And that is a really interesting dynamic, almost a bit of an arms race now between the players and the developers when it comes to designing content. Because one of the things that was very interesting about Harvest Temple Challenge Mode, which is kind of what started this and kind of got people a bit more excited about hard content. And we can see that with the community that's developed around that, is that nobody had any idea how the norm mode worked, right? Nobody saw it coming, right? So people went into CM, people had no idea what anything was, like how to push the orb, how to do anything, like how the Zaitan attack worked, nothing. Nobody even knew what these attacks did. But this time, people went in with a plan, and that meant that the only difficulty was the stuff that was different, right? The stuff that was actually on the challenge mode itself. And as a result of that, the guilds kind of crushed it in a way that would be otherwise quite unusual, I think. But I still really enjoy the fight. I particularly love how multiple enemies are handled, right? Where you have to focus down one at a time, but the other one can be active. It will still do mechanics sometimes, all that kind of stuff. It's a very mobile fight. I think it's one of my favorite strike missions in terms of design. So I'll let ArenaNet off on it not being Harvest Temple 2. Not everything can be Harvest Temple, I guess. But anyway, what do you gamers think? What are we thinking of Old Lion's Court challenge mode so far?
I think
I really like it. It's so good. Oh, like just, oh my gosh, like it feels like almost like a Final Fantasy fight in a way. Like it's very mechanic heavy. It's like you have to figure out the mechanics. It almost reminds me of like Deimos. You know, like where I guess like the basic fight itself is not that hard, but you have to know exactly how the mechanics work. And if like even one person messes it up and puts the red in the wrong spot, it's like really dangerous. It's cool. It feels like a very, you know, like you got to understand the mechanics, and if you master them and know how they work, it's pretty simple. But the first time you go in, it's actually pretty overwhelming. Again, I think that's the reason it dies so fast is because the mechanics were pretty much the same as the normal modes. So everyone that was like preparing already knew the whole fight basically. But I went in with like some people from my music guild, and most of those had not done normal mode at all. And some of them are like, what's it called? It's not that, you know, we might be a music guild, but some of them are actually really, really skilled players. And it still took us a while to like just figure it out and for everyone to learn it. And it was just really satisfying to like, you know, figure out the mechanics and see how to do it and stuff. It does make me think though, like, let's say they hadn't released normal modes before. Would the challenge mode have taken significantly longer? I think so. Like, if they just hadn't released normal modes 3 weeks before, then I think that the CM clear might have genuinely taken a little bit longer. Might still probably wouldn't have been super long, but I don't know. It's cool. I like it a lot. It's a little bit sad that there's some cheesy strats just like kind of make the whole thing like super simple. But if you stay away from those, I actually think it is pretty challenging the first time you do it. It took me and my group like 6 hours to get it the first time. Which you know, not exactly world first speedrunners, but when I then like did it again later after like knowing exactly how it works, we got it pretty fast. But it's cool. Yes, very mechanic heavy fights, good times. I liked it a lot. I really enjoyed myself.
Boom.
I have some thoughts on it as well. I think first things first, I wasn't expecting it to be very difficult because even though I guess like in our real life time frame, right, it was the latest strike mission to have been released. But for I think a lot of like actual players of the game that don't really follow along with the strike mission timeline super closely, like especially later as they join the game, this is canonically going to be one of the first strike missions that they encounter, right? Because lore wise, it's in season 1, right, or something like that. So I feel like it doesn't really make that much sense if the first strike mission that a lot of new players might encounter is the hardest strike mission that currently exists in the game. I feel like that doesn't really make all that much sense.
Yes.
So I think like for myself, I kind of like tempered my expectations. I was expecting it to be more along the lines of like Aether Blade or Zunlight Jade Junkyard sort of level, which it did end up kind of being around that level. So that was kind of like number one. So I wasn't expecting it to be super difficult. I think the second thing, and this is something that I've really enjoyed in Guild Wars 2 rating, I don't think I've played enough other MMOs to really say like about it definitively, but something I've really enjoyed in Guild Wars 2 is that you always have to be doing something while the mechanics are happening. So I feel like when I played the very little amount of Final Fantasy that I've done in the past, typically there's like a DPS phase and then there's a mechanics phase, and they're very separate. So the mechanics are difficult, but you kind of like once you know what to do, there's no pressure to still be like laying down damage while it's happening at the same time. Whereas I feel like pretty universally, I think this is especially true in like some of the more difficult raids and some of the more difficult fractals. There's a constant pressure to need to do damage to the fight while also handling mechanics at the same time. And I think that's what this strike mission did really well. Like, right, it's like you said, like the entire time that you're hitting one boss, there's a second one that's constantly laying down mechanics on you. So you have to be able to handle both at the same time. And you don't really have a chance to really like, I guess, catch your breath in a way where like you can handle the mechanic first and then continue DPSing. You have to be able to juggle both at the same time. So I thought that was really interesting. And I think that's, in my opinion, one of the more fun aspects of Guild Wars 2 rating, because in a way it feels a little bit more dynamic. Like it feels less stagnant, if that makes any sense. It's not just like a scripted fight where like everything happens on the exact same timeline every single time you do it. Feels in a way a little bit more like PvP actually, right? It's like you're kind of PvPing against the boss, but yeah. So I enjoyed it quite a bit, though I will say I think my experience was a little not entirely organic because my first kill was a day after it first released because I was busy on the day of, and then one of my guilds had already cleared it and they're like, hey, we're gonna try to clear it again, you want to come with? And I was like, okay, sounds good. So then we ended up just one pulling it, so I didn't really get the chance to naturally progress on the fight.
Yeah, Yeah, no, I completely agree with all that. I do think that the encounter design can really be praised there, like the mechanical overlaps. The one thing that I quite liked, and I was really expecting them to ramp this up a lot actually in the challenge mode, was the damage pressure. Seriously, I got away with it. I almost thought my team was going to roast me. I was like, guys, the tether. The further you go with the tether, the more damage you take. We've got to make sure that we're already out at the edge when we get the tether, because there's a mechanic that 3 people got a spread circle. And then you have to spread out. And then one of those, I thought this was a really fun mechanic. One of those 3 people gets a little tether thing that will then place one of the red pools down that you have to be careful around. And then it will teleport you back to where you are. But you take more damage the further you get teleported. So I was like yelling at my team, guys, we've got to get this positioning right. We've got to make sure we're spreading correctly every single time, right? Don't get hit by the boomerang attack that the boss does there. Don't get hit by anything. And then the challenge mode comes around and there's no damage, right? Like there's nothing. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind. Then I was like, oh yeah. Seriously, I was practicing, guys, every time there's a push and pull, Jalis, 50% damage reduction, we're going to get that going. Frostor on Temis. We were like sweating. We were like sweating super hard. I'm like, yeah, how are we going to handle this damage pressure? How are we going to handle the healing? We're at a heal Tempest, right? Heal Tempest. Like, dude, Mech is not going to be good enough for this. Mech is not going to be a strong enough healer. Got to wheel out the Tempest. Like, oh, okay, nothing happened. But I think it was really fun. I actually really enjoyed doing that and kind of putting together how we were going to approach it and think about it with super speed application and so on. I actually really enjoyed it. Speaking of the damage thing as well, I was watching a lot of groups go after this, and to ArenaNet's credit, this is something that doesn't happen very often. I think one of the biggest roadblocks that groups were encountering actually was the damage output, specifically when the knights go into their kind of push or pull mode and they apply a lot of pressure. If groups don't correctly stay together and use healing cooldowns efficiently, you get punished pretty hard, actually. So, I think it's more the case that we just were very, very try-hard and had a composition that was kind of really aimed at trying to solve that problem that a lot of groups maybe didn't have so much trouble. But I think a lot of groups that maybe just kind of went in with just, we're just going to play, just get in there and blast with 10 classes, right? And just see what we can do. And without some coordination and pre-planned movement, that the pressure actually was there, which is really cool because I think that quite often there isn't a lot of healing pressure on the groups in Guild Wars 2. A lot of it is usually just don't get hit or you'll get one shot. And I really like the fact that adding in some actual sustained damage and a bit of work for the healers, some positioning that DPS players have to do, I think is really good, right? I think that's a really fun and different way to actually play the fight. So I think it is it's nicely designed. It does make me pretty hyped for the future actually of strike missions because they could go really far. If you took a strike mission like Old Lion's Court, you could actually push that to you could make that brutal, I think. Really, really intense encounter. But obviously they chose not to because, Emmy's right, voice of reason, you can't get to level 80 and then the content's actually just so hard it makes you quit the game. Right, you go, wait, this is how the rest of the game is? You just do Old Lion's Court CM, and it's so hard that you go, wait, I will never venture into PV ever again. This is impossible. You get that, you try for 3 hours, the boss HP is on like 95%. That'd probably be a bit too much.
I guess they could have done another CM achievement. You know how in Anka there was like where you had to like fill all the CCs and the DPS check actually became really hardcore. Maybe something like that would have worked quite well. There was the achievement where you had to CC every time, which was like a little bit more challenging, but not that much. Something I really like though is just how it feels like all the different strike CMs kind of test something different.
This is true.
Like I liked what I liked about this one, how it was really sort of like very positioning was really important. So something that my group struggled with, again, like more than half of us hadn't even done a normal mode, but it's like, there's this mechanic where you have to like run away when it sucks you in. People would not run away together. Everyone would go like, oh shit, I have to run away, and everyone would run to a different place and we would just all die. So that was like fun how they sort of like, it feels like if you do all the strike CMs, it makes you like a good player. Like Harvest Temple CM teaches you how to do kind of a mechanic dance, and then this one teaches you about positioning and healing, and then I don't know, like something like Kining is also like about coordinating like the sniper and stuff. It feels like they're all very distinct from each other. And another thing I really liked was, again, I said that it felt kind of like demos. I love the red mechanic. How there's like 3 different things that drop reds. And like if you're not careful, you drop them in the center, and if your DPS is not like super high, that gets you in trouble. You have reds in the center, you're gonna die if there's too many of them. I love how you could kind of kite it and kind of neatly stack them like hands kiting style and stuff. That's something we haven't really seen in Strike CM so far. Like just sort of like kite the AoE mechanic like that. So yeah, it's cool. I liked it a lot. I like how all the strike sims don't feel like they're just doing the same fight over and over, slightly remixed. But they generally all feel like very different, and they try to teach you different things about the game. So yeah, I very much enjoyed it.
I'll kind of follow up on that because I agree completely, because I remember a lot of people would ask me, like, do you think this is harder or do you think this is harder? And the answer to that is always, well, like, that's really hard to say because they're hard in very different ways, right? It's like Aetherblade Hideout, I think everybody can pretty much agree universally. It was pretty easy, but there was a puzzle sort of mechanic that hadn't really been introduced into the game anywhere else. And then Anka CM, especially, right, was like a very, very tight DPS check if you wanted to be able to actually get the title. And it was also really, really tight healing check, right? To make sure that people didn't die when they got the healing debuff. And then on the other hand, Kining Overlook CM, right? Like the DPS check was pretty light. Like you didn't really need to have super competitive DPS, but if you failed the mechanics, it was pretty much an instant group wipe, right? It's like if you stood in the wrong spot with the sniper, boom, 4 people are immediately dead, right? Or if you like mess up the red circle, like boom, half your squad is dead. So it was a very punishing mechanics fight. And then Harvest Temple CM kind of like combined it all, right? Like there was a little bit of puzzle shenanigans, right? With like where to place the reds, where to position all of the green circle mechanics. There was a little bit of a DPS check, right? Like you have to be able to meet a certain amount of DPS, otherwise you're just gonna wipe. And then there was definitely like a mechanics check, right? It's like if you failed the greens, if you failed the jump, if you failed like, you know, the stun breaks, like that sort of thing, then you would also wipe. So I actually completely agree with that 100%. And I think something that I would really like to see is if like, let's say like they release a set of strike missions, right? Like we had the set in End of Dragons. If we had like a set of strike missions in Heart of Thorns, and then like a set of strike missions in Path of Fire, it could be really cool if they did the same sort of like incremental learning, where like the first strike they release, pretty easy. The second one kind of like forces you to learn about something new. The third one forces you to learn something different. And then the final one is kind of like a culmination of all 3 of them put together. I think that would be like super cool. So
yeah, this might be a bit almost anti the spirit of Guild Wars 2, but when we get a batch of strike missions, like you said, just all in one go, I think it'd be really fun if all of the challenge modes dropped at the same time and you have to beat them linearly, right? You have to actually go through them in order. Now, I think they could lift that restriction after a while if they wanted to. Like, I'm kind of more thinking about the kind of the spectacle and that kind of progression element, the race of beating all of them. Because look, a lot of guilds are actually pretty hyped. I know that a lot of viewers and community members were also pretty excited to see who was going to get in there and try and take it down first. A lot of the top guilds were streaming, like SC was streaming. MCA were also streaming. Lucky Noobs were streaming too. And obviously I was streaming, okay? Best guild ever. But yeah, I think that was really cool. So I'd love to see like a proper multi-boss kind of race, especially considering how well Harvest Temple Challenge Mode did, right? I think that was really, really fun. I mean, look, and that's not even copied, by the way, guys. Like the game actually got a lot of notoriety. Like there were a lot of people going like, ooh, when there was a hard boss added to Guild Wars 2. Yeah, it raised a few eyebrows in other MMO communities. People were definitely looking at the game. So I think leaning into that a little bit, at least temporarily, would be pretty cool. Right? You're describing a raid. Well, not really. This is like something that people are obviously gonna bring up here. And the difference between strike missions and raids is that strike missions just reuse story bosses. That's what they are. A raid is like a completely different, separate thing. And you could, in theory, put the raid from the story. Like the raid is like is actually in the story as well. That would be an option, but that will be a very, very different thing and probably a little bit weird, right? I don't think there are that many story instances in the game that have more than one boss enemy, as far as I'm aware. So that's probably not going to happen. But yeah, it's exciting times, and I think they'd almost be more inclined to do that in the future, because they won't have to kind of stretch out the content like they did with End of Dragons. However, there is one topic that this is like a little mini topic before we talk about balance, actually, that might dissuade them from doing this. And okay, this needs to be talked about now, and ArenaNet need to think about this. There are a lot of bugs. Strike missions are quite broken, and they haven't been fixed yet either. And this is something that ArenaNet now need to think about. A lot of these releases that are dropping are kind of breaking the game, you know, and yet a lot of it does get fixed quickly. For example, the Bladesworn Elite skill Tactical Reload just didn't do anything for a while, which was really funny, but also very unfortunate. You don't get any extra damage on Fierce Blow, on Hammer. When you were fighting a boss with a Defiance bar, right? Currently in PvE. The Strike mission, you can still stealth, basically, and make the bosses do nothing. You can just remove the reveal you get using Deadeye, and then just go perma-stealth, right? This is not great. Sometimes the little mini-bosses, they teleport around and kill you for no reason, right? Like, that can happen. You know, on Kinding Overlook, you know, I was actually doing some raid giveaways the other day with a cell group, and we just had the two raid passengers, go to the side of the platform /GG, and the sniper does literally nothing, okay, for the entire fight. Broken. We have just this insane stuff, like we have Aetherblade Hideout. You know, you just get boon ripped randomly at the start. Sometimes the blue lightning attack just doesn't happen, by the way. Oh, Harvest Temple CM. Harvest Temple CM, this one was actually... Oh no, I've stopped moving. I like that. That's a new emote right there. But that's not the point.
Speaking of bugs.
Okay, speaking of bugs, see, look, I can't talk. You know, glass houses, right? But anyway, even worse than that. Speaking of bugs, Sneb's about to join as well. And honestly, I like that. Okay? Yeah. But also, Harvest Temple CM. Understanding the bugs of Harvest Temple CM is actually a rite of passage in understanding the game. So I really do think that ArenaNet need to think about bugs and improve this procedure, because right now the game is getting more and more broken as time goes on, and it's not really being addressed. Not good. Tell me about bugs. Well, I fixed my camera, and maybe Sneb joins.
All right. The biggest bug that really made me really sad is I was doing a title attempt with a guild, and then we managed to get it after an hour and a half. And then the bug made it so that we didn't get the title. And I remember literally thinking, this is not good. Let me sit here for like 20 minutes typing out a bug report and everything to make sure that ArenaNet knows exactly what happened and everything. And I like to think that that bug report helped them actually fix the problem so that they fixed the bug in the very next day. But I haven't gotten the chance to actually like redo the strike CM since this week was really busy for me. So that was one that directly impacted my enjoyment of the game, because it's really disappointing. Like when we like finally got past like the hump and like we managed to CC everything, everybody was alive, like everybody got like, you know, title eligibility. We saw the little like yellow icon on our bar, and then we killed everything and we're like, yay, we did it. And then everyone was like, wait a second, I don't have the title. And you could like actually feel the mood kind of dropping more and more and more. And then I think, I mean, the bugs and the other encounters are also like very unfortunate, because it's like once you learn what they are, they're pretty easy to deal with, right? It's like on Harvest Temple, if you phase too quickly, then you just slow down DPS, I guess, right? It's like if you know how to deal with it, then that's fine. And then same thing on Kinding Overlook. It's like if you beat up the boss and he phases in the middle of doing like the red swipe, so then congratulations, you have 3 dead bodies on the floor, so you just gotta slow down DPS. But like it's still very unfortunate, because it feels like your progress has been stopped by something that was not intended to be designed into the encounter, which I think it slows down, I guess, like the momentum and the hype of clearing that encounter a lot more. So
exactly.
I almost kind of like the Harvest Temple bugs. It feels like
You
it's
enjoy
part
them?
of the challenge. Genuinely, it's like, oh, we have to slow down DPS. Oh, now we have to push DPS. Otherwise, we're gonna get the bug. It's like, it feels like it's genuinely part of the challenge a little bit.
yeah.
Although probably shouldn't be there. Probably shouldn't be there. But yeah, like the thing that I'm confused about is how the title bugs keep happening. It feels like almost every challenge mode
There's something wrong with them.
Yeah, like either there's just no title, like people don't get it, or like it's happened several times now that people get the title in normal modes, which kind of, you know, kind of takes away from the prestige a little bit. Like that has happened twice now. I think that happens with Kinding as well. And like I think it's happened several times where you don't get a chest at the end. Like I'm not too sure. Like, but I'm actually pretty happy that Harvest Temple didn't have that.
Yeah, that would have been funny. You beat it and you don't get Void Walk.
Yeah, just
oh
my
no,
God, that would have been a disaster. I mean, they took extra time with Harvest Temple, right? Where they
because I think they were worried about it. Yeah, because to be fair, Kinding was broken, right? So that's probably why they took their time. They're like, hang on a minute, okay, right, we've got some serious problems here.
I think there was Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I think there was some miscommunication about the title, though. Like, there were some people that thought it was bugged, but it just turned out that the title, like, instructions had been poorly written, because I think in the actual achievement it said you couldn't get 3 or
But
more
it's 2.
stacks.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you have to actually get less than 3.
Yeah,
It's
less
like
than
the
3.
classic programmer, like less than or equals or something like that. So
Yeah.
I think that was just a little bit of miscommunication. But I actually, okay, maybe a little bit of a spicy take. I was gonna say I actually agree with Lara a little bit. I think having the bug-like interactions actually be a part of Harvest Temple did actually increase, I think, and I want to say my enjoyment, but it did increase the skill floor a little bit. So the example I'm specifically thinking about is when you're phasing on the Morjamoth phase, and he does like the chin slams and everything, but if you like phase in the middle of that, the slams still like radiate outwards. I think that was an example where, you know, you had to be paying attention to the specific percent of the boss before finishing that phase. So it did require people to not just like monkey DPS and just like try to slam the boss as hard as they could just to finish the fight or finish that phase as quickly as possible. It did force you to kind of think about it. But on the other hand, I think like a bug that I would consider to be very unfun is in the final phase with like Suwon 2, even Suwon 1. If you phase too quickly, she speeds up the entire second phase. I think that was very not fun, because I think that was, I guess it felt very arbitrary, right? It's like, it felt like, okay, well now, congratulations, you just sped up the fight. You skipped an entire phase in a completely unrelated like phase, right? Whereas
good.
I feel like with Morjamoth, it's like if you phase right then and you know that there's going to be shockwaves, then you probably shouldn't phase. You know, I feel like that at least somewhat makes sense. But yeah, I don't know.
I think it's important to identify what's actually good here, right? Like, I think what is really interesting is that you would slow down damage or adjust the way you play in order to manipulate the fight. Like, that's actually a really interesting thing, right? The key is that it should be, and this is why I think some of the bugs feel bad and some of the bugs are like, okay, well, this is not that much fun. It's because the bugs on Suwon are like weirdly deterministic, right? That you can actually manipulate them every single time. So in a way, if you die to a Suwon bug, in some scuffed sense, it is your fault because you could have played around it, because it will happen every time. If you do something on challenge mode, it will happen every single time if you behave the exact same way. I think it's the bugs that don't always happen that are really frustrating, or the ones that completely block progress. Like, for example, if you kill the sniper while she has exposed on Cunning Overlook challenge mode, then congratulations, you actually have to reset the fight because it is now broken and you cannot proceed. It is over for you. GG. That's really unfun. Oh yeah, or like to give an example on Harvest Temple, the invisible chomp. Or have you seen the sped up swipe on Suwon as well? That one is horrible. It's so bad. So yeah, just a one-shot ability that happens way faster than normal and is actually badly telegraphed as well. That's a really unfun bug too. Is it sometimes telegraphing? It's just not good, right? But anyway, we could talk about bugs for a long time. Like, to me, the contentious issue here is that I think ArenaNet actually need to fix this stuff because it's annoying and it's building up a lot of tech debt as well over time. Adding more bugs into the game, it's going to happen. We understand, right? You know, it's going to break. That's the way it is. Things are going to go wrong, but ArenaNet really need to think about it, in my opinion, because it's kind of been, maybe I'm just insane, but I feel like it's been getting worse. Like, every patch has brought more and more bugs into the game, more than usual even, and it needs to get looked at. Because otherwise the game is just going to, it's just going to feel very unpolished, right, eventually. And that is, it's a little bit weird to say this. Oh, I'm going to get absolutely roasted for this. But I've been playing some World of Warcraft recently. And you know what's weird? The game just kind of works, right? And that, it's almost imperceptible. It's really hard to describe it, but it's extremely noticeable, the difference in polish between Guild Wars 2 and other MMO titles. And that, in my opinion, is really worth talking about. And ArenaNet need to think about it. Because it is, I'm telling you, and I'm at the biggest Guild Wars 2 simp you're ever going to see, okay? But it's extremely noticeable, the difference in polish between these two titles. And I think it's actually probably one of the things that, as a new player, that I think you will pick up on that. If you're a new player and you play a game and something's just obviously broken, you're going to, whoa, what's this, right? I think it's really going to take you out of it a little bit. And it's getting to the point where it is a bit ridiculous. When there are game-breaking bugs that have been in the game for years, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And I have to say this because otherwise I'm going to get roasted in the comments. Yes, I'm very well aware that WoW has game-breaking bugs, but the difference is they actually fix them. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like, I understand that, you know, if you're doing something like a strike CM, of course, perfect world, it would release 0 bugs, right? But I understand that, you know, the second you release it, suddenly so many people are going to try it, which is way more than any QA team could reasonably test. You're going to find some bugs, pretty much. But something that bothers me a little bit about it is how it feels like they're kind of not fixing them anymore. Like when Kyning came out, they actually did go fix a bunch of them because Kyning was genuinely, there were so many bugs in Kyning at release. But like, for example, there's like this really obvious bug on Zaitan phase in Harvest Temple, where there's like AoE sometimes, and sometimes there's not.
Yeah,
it seems to be like every second
Yeah,
time you get there. And that feels like the most obvious bug to me. Like there's something, like, I'm surprised that, you know, it feels like they're just kind of like, Harvest Temple, that one's done, we're not touching it anymore. And I think it would be nice if they would, you know, spend some time doing sort of a, you know, just like looking at like, hey, what are the bugs? Let's go through, let's see how many we can fix. Making it completely bug-free would, of course, be challenging, but it feels like there's some low-hanging fruits, maybe? Again, it's hard to say without, you know, being a developer at ArenaNet, but you know, there's never like a patch where it's like, oh, by the way, we fixed a bug in Harvest Temple CM. It's just kind of the way it is, and like it feels like they're not really wanting to go back to it. Something I've also noticed though with these.
Yo, Sneb on headset mic, bro.
How bad is it?
How's your PC doing? I think it's fine. You know,
bad.
I enjoy it. I think this is good. I think people are gonna prefer this actually.
Well, okay. Right now, I mean, I could go live. I could show you what the. It's not good. I've basically destroyed my entire room in like a fury to try to fix my computer. So I will activate 1 second. Also, I just went to the gym, so I am also kind of nasty. So just don't.
What? Oh, there we go.
Okay, look at this.
God.
So I took apart this computer so that I could put all the parts in here because I bought a heatsink that was too big for this case. So everything is moving over here. But even worse, it's not good. Even worse.
What has happened?
What
What
is going on?
I just found this piece, which I needed. I was gonna like throw my computer out the window. I was so frustrated because I can't put the heatsink on without these pieces. But I couldn't find them because it's a pre-built, and I moved, and when I moved, everything got lost. So I literally just found this in this plastic bag in the back of a closet.
Oh no.
So yeah.
You know, every time you move, you always think, "Oh, I'm not gonna need this thing. It's probably okay if I don't like bring it with me and all that kind of stuff."
Yeah.
This time you found out you needed it.
Yeah.
I think that it's gonna be fixed by the end of the day, though. No, I have hope.
Yeah.
So that's good, because this is my setup. It was getting real sad, you know. Can't turn it on, so.
Yeah,
and then that's my shrine over there, for those wondering.
Yeah, the Guild Wars 2 shrine is there. We see the Dervish as well. There's some Guild Wars Nightfall.
Oh yeah, did you not see that? Yeah.
Well, we did see
Nightfall.
it. Wow. There it is. Wow.
Yeah, and then I've got the signed art by Jason Wiggins up there. Or is it Wiggin? Yeah, Wiggin, not Wiggins. Wiggins is a basketball player.
I saw you posted like a Zoja figure on Twitter.
Oh yeah, that's right here.
They have that as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Zoja figure, huh? Is that post blighting pod or pre blighting pod?
No, we're not talking about this. No. We're not
no,
doing
this is this is like 2014 Zoja. So
it is time for an intervention.
Yeah.
I feel
this might be my favorite thing that I have right now. This is so niche.
Are those like keycaps?
It's a Z board. So they had this like particular keyboard back in like 2006 or 7 or something, and that's what that's for. Yeah, this is the this is part of the collection. So actually, no, this might be my favorite thing. The
Oh, so have you not been able to do the strike CM yet because your PC has been dead?
I have not done the strike CM, so I have no context.
No.
Yeah, and I have all this.
He's just doing it off
Do
stream.
that.
You know, he broke his computer, so he didn't have to stream progression. That's real. That's why.
Yeah,
It
I'm
was
just waiting for you
intentional.
all to solve it so I can go be like, oh yeah, this is easy. Yeah.
It's big.
Yeah, this is the stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Wow.
Oh, and then this one.
Yeah?
This is bad lighting, but this is Jorah. This is my favorite concept art from Guild Wars 1. Super cool.
Oh.
Anyway, that's the impromptu tour, and the reason why I haven't been able to stream or do anything is because, well, everything's destroyed. So there you go. There you have it.
Saw you in Spirit Vale, like
Yeah, you were in
2
Raid
hours
Sneb.
ago. Yeah.
Raiding with Melo on
I
EU.
I forgot. Okay, no, this is good actually. This is content. I forgot I was on EU. That frequently happens to me because I play on multiple accounts and I, forget that I can transfer, and then I transfer once and then. Anyway, so I'm on EU. I join a group. They're asking for KP and stuff. I give them the KP.me or whatever, and then this like random core thief with like 100 achievement points joins and like somehow, talks them into allowing them to join, and they're like, I have some KP, and they pinged 1 KP and it's from like Wing 7 or something. I was like, okay, whatever, like we'll give you a shot. But then I think it was Mela. I didn't know it was Mela at first, but then I hovered over the name because I was like, who is this? And it said like Pain Man ZTFC. And I was like, Pain Man ZTFC. It's like, that's Mela 100%. So then I checked and it was Mela. And then Mela got kicked, which was hilarious. But,
Wow. That's unfortunate. Yeah. I honestly, people get crazy. I saw Plenix get kicked and he had 6,000 LI. That's crazy. These groups are out of control. They're completely unhinged.
Did they want 7,000?
Well, they only wanted kill proof, and Plenix doesn't have any kill proof because he just he puts it all in the guild, right? So he doesn't he has no kill proof. And the guy said, you have to give kill proof. He's like, I have 6k LI. Is that not enough? And I was like, no, you have 0 KP. You lose. And he didn't wait for the KP.me, so Plenix got deleted. He was purged. Yeah, it was 6,000 escort kills. Yeah, exactly. 6,000 of them. Insane.
I got kicked from a Kainan group recently because
Oh,
someone
no.
else ran into me and killed me with like the AoE, and then the commander just kicked both of us.
Wow.
The first I was murdered,
Yeah.
and the commander just went like, I'm not sure who did it, but it was one of you two.
That's
Good times.
That's pretty unhinged. That's unfortunate stuff.
Oh well.
Well,
Still better than what's happened to Snap's PC though.
that's true. Yeah.
it is true. I deleted myself. Yeah, the worst part, it was while I was doing admin for the tournament. I was doing admin for the raid tournament, I was answering questions, getting stuff prepared, and then my computer overheated, and I was like, what the heck? And then I like tried to do like a quick fix, and it turns out my all-in-one heatsink just, it just died. End of life. So it was going to like 100 degrees, and I was like, that's not good. So I bought a new one, but it was going to take like 5 or 6 days to get here because, well, Black Friday deals and shipping is really slow, and then it gets here and it doesn't work. So it's just been this like crazy
And
thing.
they had to buy a new case as well.
Well, this is an old case. This is an old case. So I had to like go full necromancer roleplay and like resurrect this old case. Yeah. So it's really dusty too. So I'm trying to clean it all up.
That's
hopefully it works. I think it'll be fine.
It's all good.
Hopefully.
I think we're in a good position here. But off that slight diversion, Snebtime, story time. I think let's talk about the balance patch a little bit. It's a little bit of balance gaming. And I think we can't, we can talk about some general ideas a little bit later, but I think we have to talk about the star of the show first. And that is Firebrand. The age of the Guardian is over. Actually, that's not true. Okay, but that's what some people are saying, but that isn't true. Firebrand got redesigned. Complete change. And funnily enough, this is, the change that Arena ended up doing, it actually is the change that if I was in charge, I would have made, which is basically replacing pages with an initiative system, and it's now shared between all the tomes. And there you go. It actually exists. And funnily enough, just kind of broad thoughts. I just say it's a little bit undertuned, right? Not much, actually. I think it is still pretty strong, but a touch undertuned currently. However, I really enjoy the playstyle, right? And yeah, I'm obviously going to be, I like the idea of the design. I like the design change. So, of course, I'm going to enjoy it because I think it's a good idea. But I actually think it is a really good solution. As it really means that you can't have everything all at once. You're going to have to make these trade-offs between different utilities, right? And doing damage and healing and using defensive capacities and so on. And that's exactly what Firebrand needed without fully redesigning everything, right? The other option was, okay, well, it's kind of a little bit busted to say, you have all of these skills, so we're just going to completely redesign the class, right? Like, that would be the other option. But I think this one actually worked out pretty well. And with a little bit of tuning, I think it can actually be really strong and incredibly fun to play, actually. Just needs a little bit of a look at how many base pages you have, regeneration rate, maybe some way to regenerate pages through a trait, through mantras, potentially, right? Maybe if you use the final charge of a mantra, you get a page back or something like that, right? That'll be kind of broken in the current state, actually. We need old mantras as well. But yeah, a few changes at that, and I think it's going to work out really well. It's really fun to play. It feels incredibly dynamic, and, it's very responsive and very active. I like it. I give the rework a high rating. What do you gamers think?
I think, so I have a couple thoughts. I guess it would be best to summarize them into like DPS Firebrand thoughts versus a support Firebrand playstyle. So I think overall, the rework, I think it fixed a lot of issues that I think a lot of people have had with Firebrand, which is that it was just always so good in so many different ways without ever needing any trade-offs that there really felt like there was no point to play any other class. I think like obviously that argument can be made for most classes to at least some degree, but it felt very, very, very suffocating to like try to compete against. So I think it definitely fixed a lot of those issues. And I think the support versions of Firebrand, so specifically Heal Firebrand, honestly, it feels pretty good for them. Like to be able to like dip in and out of your tome 2 and 3, however as you need, like depending on what your group needs, is pretty good. I think on the other hand though, DPS Firebrand really suffered. I think the best way to kind of give an example of this is that people ran the numbers, they did some testing, they did some benching, and apparently right now the best way to effectively use your tome skills after draining all of the charges is just to dip into your tome 1 every time your 5 skill is up and you have 2 pages, and press that one button, leave your tome, and then go back to auto attacking on axe. And I think that kind of brought DPS Firebrand in the exact opposite direction, right? Like now it feels very stagnant. It feels very like not fun to play. It feels like you're kind of just doing one thing over and over and over again with almost no dynamicness to it at all. And I think that would be my personal thoughts on that. Is I'm not a game developer, so I don't know for sure. But something that I can kind of say from my time playing Virtuoso, which is a specialization that I really like, is that there's a lot of or I guess in Virtuoso's case, a lot of blade interaction inside of the trait. So if you do specific things, then you generate blades. If you do specific things, then you're buffing the specific class mechanic. So I feel like it would be really interesting if DPS Firebrand could do the same thing. When you do certain things that are unique to DPS Firebrand, then you're able to get class specific ammo or like the initiative system or something like that. So that's obviously there already a little bit on a small scale on the trait where like you cast 3 skills and it gives you back a page. But I think expanding on that a little bit more, like maybe each trait column, right? Like each of the 3 choices that you have, you can maybe make it so if you use 3 skills in an offensive way or a defensive way or utility-esque way, or if you use like certain skills, then you get certain interactions with like the pages so that you can regenerate them. I think that would make it a lot more fun to play, and it would make you feel like you actually have some thought instead of just auto attacking on axe over and over again and pressing your F1 5 skill once every 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So
currently things are just a bit too expensive and you can't use enough of those abilities in PvE, right? And that means that you kind of end up not really doing anything. I also think they should probably just diversify the abilities a lot. I think this is an issue that Firebrand has a little bit, especially in the aggressor tome. And this is why you'll notice that a lot of the criticism is levied at DPS Firebrand. Why? It's because, honestly, Tome 1 is pretty one-dimensional from a PvE, standpoint, right? It's just the abilities do damage. And then you end up with the thief problem. And the thief problem in PvE is that if your only goal is to do damage, in that's it, in one context, just as much DPS as possible, then you're only going to use one skill. Because it turns out that when it comes to initiative and you kind of have this limiting factor of this resource, then you only want to spend your resource on exactly this one ability, which is kind of one of the things that holds Thief back as well a little bit. So I think just making the abilities a bit more diverse in how you use them, and they actually did try to do this a little bit with Scorched Aftermath. That is now a really strong area of effect ability, whereas Ashes of the Just is a single target ability, and you do a lot of damage there. So you have some slight situational ability to do that. But yeah, increasing that is going to be good. Just looking at page costs, I mean, like, right now, the really big outlier for me, I think, is the epilogue in Tome of Courage. It costs 3 pages. That's a lot of pages when you only have 5 as a baseline, right? That's very expensive. Ouch. I think one of the best things they could do is actually just give Firebrand an extra few pages as a base. Like, make it 7 base, and the trait gives you 3 extra for 10. Right, I think that would be an approach that you could take to just really help out with managing those pages and building them up over time. Maybe take a second off the cooldown of a page. And then, yeah, as you say, Amy, I think that's a really good idea, is add some kind of mechanic. Make Swift Scholar a bit better. If you use, I actually like this type of mechanic. If you use 3 abilities in a row in a tome right now, you get a page back. You can make that 2 pages, maybe, right, instead. And if you increase the base page amount, that also really helps with chaining abilities together, so you can keep getting value out of that trait. And this is the really key thing about this rework. ArenaNet have so many ways they can make this balance now. They can look at Swift Scholar. They can look at page count. They look at recharge. They can look at ability recharge within those tomes. They can look at the passive recharge rate, right? There's so many things they can play with and mess around with, because this was the problem with Firebrand, is that you can say, well, we're just going to keep making the cooldown on these abilities higher and higher and higher, but they're still dominant, right? They're still incredibly dominant. We saw this time and time again with PvP and World versus World. You can nerf it and nerf it and nerf it, but it just won't die because of how strong it is on a mechanical level, right? It just does a little bit too much. So forcing the player to make some trade-offs is really important. And quick bonus to me in here, public service announcement. Every single time there will be a change that significantly alters the gameplay, it's going to feel, and I'm going to, look at the screen, everyone, okay? Bad. It's going to feel bad. Why? Because you aren't used to it, and it's different, and it's a big rework, right? It's not going to feel good immediately, especially if you're getting nerfed, right? That's just the way it is. So everyone running around saying, oh, it feels terrible, oh, it feels horrible, right? Of course it's going to feel weird, right? It's going to feel different. You're less powerful right now, and the playstyle is completely different, so no shit, right? And there are definitely issues. There are definitely design problems that need to be addressed, and definitely balance issues. Again, I would say that Firebrand, for one of the first, in fact, for the first time in history in PvE, is probably actually a little bit underpowered, which is pretty insane, right? Especially when you consider how good Herald is right now. But yeah, of course it's going to feel weird, and whenever there's a rework like this, always give it a bit of time and actually try and play it. Don't just kind of go, no, I won't even try and play. No, actually give it a fair shot, right, and have a go. Because, honestly, there are some really exciting things about this change. I love the fact right now that on Heal Firebrand, its biggest weakness, that you only have a really big healing cooldown every 50 seconds, right, and you can only use your defensive, a really defensive tome every 75 seconds. That weakness has been essentially removed a little bit now, as you can dip into that and use that and be a lot more responsive, a lot more reactive. I think with a bit of work and a little bit of love and care, that can happen with the more aggressive Firebrand builds as well. There's a huge amount of potential here. And one more thing before I stop my unhinged rant. I think that this rework has really shown that this is something that's true of a lot of professions, but also true of Guardian, funnily enough. Yeah, core weapons maybe need a bit of a look, because I think the really big thing that is making Firebrand feel weird and not that great to play right now is because you get really trolled if you swap weapons. Because what you would do previously is you'd swap to a weapon, use a few abilities, then go in a tome and kind of use your time in that tome to cover your weapon swap, before moving back to your actually good weapon set, right? You'd use Scepter. You just go, blah, Scepter symbol down, boom, get in the tome, mash from abilities, drop out, rinse and repeat. Now you can't really do that because you only use a few abilities in the tome. You're there for a much shorter duration, and then you're kind of left on Scepter going like, oh no, what am I doing? It is still a DPS increase, funnily enough, but I think this really says that, yeah, they should probably look at core weapons, maybe look at Staff a little bit, look at Scepter a little bit, so that Guardian has like a proper full condition damage setup, I think would be a really good thing to do. But other than that, I'm on Team Rework.
I think
I'm also on Team Rework. I think you're both hitting like the nail on the head. I think that's DPS Firebrand needs a couple more interesting things to make it, to make you not just spam the same skills over and over. But if they can fix that, I genuinely think it's in a pretty good spot. I think the big issue is exactly people just kind of camp. I think you camp X right now. There's no real reason to go to your Scepter. And then, like you said, Emmy, you just kind of use like Tome 2 and Tome, like you use Tome 1 skill 2 just over and over. But that's one of those things they can fix, right? That feels like something that should pretty reasonably, again, tweak the traits a little bit, add some incentive to use more than just one skill in your tome. But I think something kind of had to be done in a way. Firebrand has been pretty much like, to use this term again, meta defining for like such a long time. And I feel like now there's like the tools for them to actually like go and properly balance Firebrand for the first time. It felt like his design was like fundamentally like unbalanceable. Like the previous design was just like so strong in a way that it was just really hard for them to even go and attempt to like try to fix it. And it feels like now, even though they're not quite there yet, like definitely DPS Firebrand needs to be made a lot more interesting, I think. Exactly, so like changing some of the core weapons maybe. But I think in the live stream they mentioned something like we'll keep a close eye on it, and we'll definitely, I think they even mentioned that they expected to have to do some tweaking. So I think all of that combined means I'm pretty hopeful. And I gotta say, Heal Firebrand just feels really cool now. I really like Engineer. I like kits. I like going in kits and then out of kits again, and it kind of feels like that now. I like how also the gameplay feels much more reactive. Like before, you would kind of have like your big F2 burst. It was like, oh wow, there's a lot of damage, and then you kind of had like your burst that you would do in your healing zone. But now you can kind of go into healing zone and use just one skill and save your other pages for if you need them later. So I feel like the skill ceiling for Heal Firebrand has been significantly increased. It feels like there's way more. It feels like you can actually like try to be a really good Firebrand now. You could kind of already do that, but now you can be like that ultimate optimization Firebrand. Try not to overheal, try to save some of your pages. And I think that's really cool. So I am also on Team Rework, but I guess DPS Firebrand needs a little bit of work, but that's doable. That's fixable, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Just to kind of like go on that a little bit more. So just to clarify, it's Tome 1 skill 5. I think that's like the really strong, because it gives you a lot of single target damage and stuff. So that's like the really, really big ticket one. So I think something I kind of want to mention here, a little bit off topic, but also on topic, is that I feel like ArenaNet's been doing a lot of incremental changes, right? Like I feel like other than like massive reworks initially, all of the tuning is actually tuning. It's not just like big changes that they kind of stick in a balance patch and then let that sit there and simmer for like 6 months to a year. I feel like it's worth noting that we've gotten more balance patches in the past 4 months than we've probably gotten in the past 4 years. So I think that part is really nice, and it gives me a lot of hope that like even if right now DPS Firebrand doesn't really feel all that great because it feels very one-dimensional, they're going to continue looking at it and they're going to continue adding ways to make it feel better and better. So that's kind of like point number 1. I think point number 2 is, again, I'm going to use Mesmer as my frame of reference because that's my main class and stuff, but I think a part of, or something that makes Mesmer really fun, is that the weapons that you can take varies a lot depending on the specific situation you're in. So when you need a lot of ad control, you can bring a focus. When you want a lot of direct damage, you can bring sword or greatsword. If you're playing like virtuoso and everything, like I've even seen like sword main hand variants compared to dagger main hand like variants and that sort of thing. And I feel like that contributes a lot to feeling like, yeah, this specific encounter, I can bring the tools that I need in order to achieve it. Firebrand, on the other hand, as of right now, other than like its saving grace that Axe does a lot of damage, I feel like you don't really have that. Like you can say like, oh, on Greatsword 5, you have like a pull or something like that. But realistically, which Firebrand is going to bring a Greatsword other than, unless they're playing like Power Firebrand or something like that, right? It's like, and then you could also like maybe argue like, focus offhand gives you like that 3-second channel block, which makes it very safe for like, encounters like Deimos CM or something like that, right? But realistically, which Firebrand is going to bring a focus offhand? So I feel like a lot of the other weapons where they supposedly have their own niche don't really actually fix that niche. It's better to just not bring it and just focus on damage than it is to bring a specific weapon that makes the encounter feel more dynamic for that specific class. So obviously then like the answer is you want to look at some of the core weapons, right? I think a lot of people tend to hyperfixate on like the damage or aspects of it. Like I saw someone saying like, add like Condi damage to like hammer, which is like, it's not a bad idea. But then realistically, if the only metric by which you're measuring this is damage, then there's always going to be one weapon that objectively does more damage. So then if you only look at that, then there's really only one reason to bring a specific weapon if it's for damage. So then you're not ever going to consider the other ones. So I feel like since we're talking about like class reworks, core reworks, all that kind of stuff, I think it would be really cool to see some of the other underutilized weapons have more, I guess, functional changes instead of just number changes. And I think this is actually pretty universal for all of the balance, like for every class so far. It's like, I feel like there's always a hyperfixation on how much damage can you do, how much boon output can you do, how much healing can you do, without really looking at all of the other things that make a class really strong, which is its utility access on its weapon bar and on its utility bar. So
yeah, I completely agree with you, Emmy, because there's just I think the reality is that there are some things that are just so powerful. For example, there are some support classes that are so powerful, it completely negates any reason for you to bring your own channeled block, for example, on Deimos. So what we end up having in Guild Wars 2 is a big concentration of a few classes that kind of do everything, and then everyone else just goes for the highest possible damage thing ever. And so I think, to add to what you said, I think if there were some kind of reason for more people to bring utility, that some of those weapons would actually shine a little bit more, but they obviously need a huge rework. Like when do you use focus, right? It does a little bit of damage and then you have a kind of a channeled block, but you kind of don't need it because you're a guardian.
Yeah.
Oh, something I found really interesting actually about the Firebrand's rework is, there used to be like the bubble, and the bubble would be quite useful on some fights. Like on like Harvest Temple CM, there's this big thing, the orb that shoots out all these projections, and then you just keep up the bubble over and over. You just do bubble, then it runs out, you do bubble again, you just keep up the bubble. But now you can't keep up the bubble the whole time anymore. Which I think was really interesting. I was like, wow, now everyone has to bring reflex. But now people just bring heralds.
Sorry.
Herald is taking over. Herald is kind of becoming the new Firebrand slowly.
Yeah,
which is kind of all.
Here's the thing. There is something that does tend to happen in Guild Wars 2, which I find incredibly frustrating, actually, and it's that people only want to play like this is the attitude in Guild Wars 2. The best in slot is viable. Everything else, complete garbage, right? It's like, come on, guys. Like, we're making CMC work for this, huh? Right? Like, there are actually loads of really strong builds that honestly are gonna give you about the same win rate, if I'm honest. I'll tell you a really fun fact. I'm gonna blow people's minds here. Heal Herald is probably one of the best healers you could run because it's really easy to play and it actually does a whole bunch of really useful stuff, but you almost never see it played, right? Because it's not considered to be good, even though it actually is, right? It is really good. Heal Tempest. We actually very specifically, in fact, played Heal Tempest on Old Lions Court Challenge Mode progression because of how strong it is in these hyper high pressure situations that require a lot of sustained healing, because we were expecting that to happen. We didn't say, oh, Mech got nerfed, so we're going to play Tempest. No, we specifically picked Tempest to do this, but yet nobody plays it. It's extremely uncommon build, right? And this is the thing. Is Firebrand best in slot now? In some places, maybe. It turns out Stand Your Ground is a really good skill. But that doesn't matter. Maybe it isn't best in slot now. I would actually tend to say that. Oh, take it easy now, by the way. Fix your PC. That in general, Herald is going to be a really just awesome choice these days. But that doesn't mean that everything else is unplayable, okay? That's not how it works. And we really need to, we've got to get out of this. We need to break free from this mentality that everything that is worse than the absolute best in slot is unplayable, right? Or isn't even worth playing. Like, oh, there's no reason to play Firebrand, bro. There's no reason to play Tempest, bro. Well, there absolutely is. So that's actually a false assumption for a start, actually. But even if there wasn't, even if Mechanist was best in slot literally everywhere, and it was actually just strictly superior, then, okay, well, maybe I just play Tempest because I like it, and it's like 5% worse, okay? Maybe that's the case. And it's the same thing with Firebrand, right? And the same thing with Herald and all this other stuff, right? The game is never going to be perfectly balanced. There will always be this strict best in slot. It's just inevitable, pretty much. This can kind of be fixed with encounter design and by adding more holes in rolls. But funnily enough, you have to be careful what you wish for here, right? If it turns out that, you know, a certain class is way better on one fight than another class, for example, then that could have some very interesting results, as people are then going to only want to play that class on that boss. So you have to be a little bit careful with this kind of stuff.
I was gonna say, I do think it's definitely, this is true in pugs, right? And like pugs, they tend to just want, you know, like the safest option possible for the least amount of chance to wipe. But I feel like even then, I've done a little bit of pugging, not in like super high stakes thing. Like I'm not like pugging KOCM or HTCM or anything like that, but I feel like most people, and like especially the easy raids and the easy strike missions, they're pretty okay with a lot of the different options for the meta right now. Like I would say, like I'm speaking a little bit for myself, but like if someone joined on like a heal Herald or a heal Firebrand, or I've even seen a couple of like Condi Quick Harbingers and like that sort of thing, I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure, go for it. I don't really particularly care. And I've had the same thing happen to myself as well, because one time I joined Ice Spirit Saga group and I recognized a lot of the people, and I was like, hey, I'm like trying heal Herald. Do you guys want to help me see how much I can push this class? And straight up almost solo healed Bone Skinner without a heal scourge. Like we got to like 10% before that finished. So I think that like convinced a lot of people like, yeah, this is like a pretty good option, especially if it's like being played well and all that kind of stuff. I think just in general with like with most games, this is not just Guild Wars 2, there's always like an inertia, if that makes any sense. Like there's always like, you know, people just try to stick with what they know and what they know works, because stepping outside of that bounds, especially if you have a limited time to play, is not exactly the best way to spend your time if you only have 30 minutes to play in that day, right? So it's like, I think there's always going to be a little bit of, I guess like, it's going to be very stubborn to move the meta. But if more and more people play, and if more and more people keep their minds open to it, then I think it's like, you know, more people will be open to the ideas of new classes and stuff.
Yeah, I need to be more specific. This is absolutely true. If you rock up on a build, no one's going to care as long as you do your job. That's not what I'm complaining about here. I'm complaining about the narrative and perception around the metagame. I'm complaining that whenever I see discourse around this, people say stuff like, there is no reason to play anything else except X, right? This is what drives me crazy, because that is extremely pervasive. You will see it in every Reddit thread, in every forum post, in every Twitch chat, right? And it drives me insane, because that is it makes it really hard to actually evaluate the state of the metagame as well, like from a developer perspective. Because if there are all these really strong builds, but people just kind of refuse to play them, then what are you supposed to do as a dev, right? Do you just overbuff it until it's completely broken? I don't know. I mean, I guess you do it that way. It's the only way you can actually make people play it, right?
Elementalist.
Yes, Catalyst, big damage. The Ellie mains are happy at last. Well, you definitely should be. But yeah, this is the problem that I really have. This is completely tangential to the topic, but I think it is something that's really important to bring up, especially in this time of great turmoil. with Firebrand for sure. I do want to. I don't like it when people say, "Oh yeah, this is completely unplayable." Like it's not viable compared to this. Why would you play this when you could play something else? It's like, I mean, why would you play anything except the best in slot then, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But yeah, like we need to not do that. It's time to stop, guys. It's time to embrace playing different things. And again, I want to be super specific. I'm not saying that people always ask for a certain thing. That actually doesn't happen very often at all. It's actually really uncommon. It does happen sometimes, but it's pretty uncommon. The thing that bothers me is the prevailing narrative around the metagame that only certain things are good, and there's no reason to play anything else. If you rock up on a build, like we said, yeah, you can get in. No one's really going to bother you. But I think that puts a huge amount of pressure on the individual to essentially kind of go against the grain, right? And that means that almost nobody's going to do it. If the burden is entirely on people to basically break the norm in a way or go against what everyone else is saying, then you're going to have everyone running mech, right? Like, for example, guys, I'm gonna tell you a really big secret. Guys, Virtuoso is far more broken than mech ever was. Far more broken than mech ever was. But because there's no massive circle jerk against Virtuoso, nobody cares. Nobody cares, guys, and it's way more broken. It's far more broken than mech ever was. Even when mech was like 38k, Virtuoso is way more overpowered. And this is kind of my problem. It's that the narrative doesn't always reflect reality when it comes to the way these things are perceived, right? But yeah. Virtuoso is absolutely broken, by the way. What are you talking about?
I like Virtuoso, but it's definitely broken.
I think, okay, completely real. I do think, like, in order to get the brokenness out of Virtuoso, you do still have to play it well. You know, it's like, I feel like you get a lot farther on, like, auto-attacking on mech than you do with, like, auto-attacking on Virtuoso. You have to at least understand a little bit, like, okay, these are, like, my big CC skills. These are, like, my big utility skills. Like, you know, I have to, like, make sure I, like, reset my phantasms, reset my shatters, like, that sort of thing. Like, it is very strong, don't get me wrong, but I feel like there is, I guess this is a little bit of, like, perception versus reality. I think a lot of people, when they look at things like, oh, I have to do these resets, I have to, like, make sure I use these skills like a specific time, or I have to make sure that I manage, like, you know, my blade count, that sort of thing. It just sounds very complicated. And I think obviously compared to Mechanist, it is more complicated, but it's not so complicated that, like, the casual player wouldn't be able to use it effectively. So I just want to add that disclaimer. I still think it's not broken. I just think it is strong.
Mesmer main. Yeah, it was like, oh yeah, can we have, like, you know, more damage on Chrono, please? You know, it's like 40k now, I think. And she's like, oh yeah, can we have some more, a little bit more DPS maybe? Yeah, just a bit more. Just, you know, Catalyst is 46k. Maybe we could be 46k as well, right? Like.
I have to say though, I guess, like, kind of pivoting away from Firebrands, we've been doing that for a while, but this whole, like, especially now is the time to play lots of classes that aren't considered to be maybe the best in slots by the Reddit community, because this balance patch was so good. Like, there's so many builds now, like, you know, like, there was a little while ago where nobody was playing Vindicator. Everyone's like, Vindicator's bad. Everyone's like, Untamed is bad. Herald is bad. Spellbreaker's bad. They all actually have, like, generally pretty good builds now. Reaper got buffed, and then everyone's like, oh, I want it to be buffed more. And then they buffed it even more. Oh my gosh. The only thing that surprised me generally about this patch is that they didn't nerf Virtuoso. Yeah. I was like, before they did the announcement, I was like doing like a bingo card, and I totally called Ellie buffs, by the way. But I was also like, Virtuoso, 100% getting nerfed, and then they didn't, which I found surprising. But, like, right now, there's, like, so many good builds. Like, it feels like every spec has got a strong build. Yeah. Literally. Like, I genuinely think that, you know, balance, there's always things to improve, but I actually think the balance is probably the best it's been in a long time right now. Like, a lot of the issues that we kind of had, I feel like they've been doing a pretty good job at addressing them. You know, looking at some of those, you know, Hollow and Reaper kind of being forgotten there, they actually went and buffed them pretty hard. Like, a lot of that stuff, even like the Firebrand issue, I guess, where, like, Firebrand was, like, super strong and it was hard to balance around, they even tried to fix that. Still some work needed for like the DPS one. But just in general, I really like the balance right now. It's cool. It's
Yeah.
like I made like a list of like classes yesterday that I want to
It's
play.
all of them.
I'm like, I'm gonna play this and this and this. They all just seem like fun right now, and it's cool. And I'm really excited. Good times.
This patch has really put damage in a good spot. I think there are a few tuning issues. For example, look, can you imagine even saying this, guys? Catalyst is probably actually too strong, okay, right now. Okay, it probably is a little bit too good.
Nerf it
it's
again.
46,000 DPS, and well, we're not going down this road, but I actually think here's a little side point. ArenaNet need to actually be a little bit careful about damage output. Guild Wars 2 encounters really start to break down when you start pushing 40k DPS. Like, the fights just stop working, just flat out. I mean, the game is not designed with that much damage. And that's not, I'm not saying Ellie, guys, I'm saying anything, right? To be clear, let me, don't worry, I'm with you, Ellie and my Ellie friends. Okay, I actually was a big proponent of Elementalist buffs. I was actually really excited to see Power Weaver buffs as well, actually. And Power Weaver's 40k as well right now. And 47,000 damage burst. It is so good. No one's actually doing 45k again raids. You are wrong! Go to Mr. Rule's channel right now on YouTube. You will see him actually doing 45k DPS on actual raid bosses. That is incorrect. The new Catalyst rotation is actually realistic to pull off. In the hands of a skilled player, you can do it in fights. You absolutely can. That is incorrect. It's actually pretty realistic. Same thing with Weaver as well. Weaver in particular, too, because it has a really nice burst window that you can utterly annihilate stuff with. He's an exception. Well, listen, then Ellie mains need to get good at the game. I mean, look, isn't that the thing about Ellie? It's like we're the complex class with, 3 more buttons than the other guy. So, I mean, yeah, learn to use those 3 buttons and away you go. I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what to say. It's time to get better. It's time to get better at the game, guys, at this point. But yeah, the game is not designed for that much damage, so I think power creep is something that needs to be thought about a little bit. But in general, very, very happy. It's really good to see Ellie back on top, pumping away, super hardcore. A few things being left over. Reaper could probably use a bit more. Dragon Hunter and Willbender probably the same. But pretty much everything else has a really, really good build. Like, Defense Spellbreaker is going to be a monster after it gets bug fixed. Like, close to 40k, I think. And you're running the defense, and you have 1 million break bar. Like, you can play anything, and it's going to be really strong right now. Seriously, it's really strong. Everything, almost every single elite specialization in the entire game, as Lara said, is going to have a really good DPS build. So what I really want to see in the next patch is ArenaNet take a proper look at supports, right? Fix the alacrity on Spectre, make the Tempest alacrity better. Maybe look at quickness on Herald, quickness on Scrapper. Definitely look at Warrior banners again, because those still are lame, and they've made the tooltips even longer, right? So they're even more annoying to use now, and weird and inflexible, right? Probably want to have a look at that, right? Like, that is where ArenaNet should be looking, because honestly, the damage meta right now, it's incredible. It is easily the most diverse and powerful meta game where you can play anything you want and feel really strong the game has ever seen, flat out. Oh yeah, that's a good point, actually. Also, probably remove quickness and alacrity from core classes. Otherwise, the speedrunners, they're gonna Blade Swarm the game, right? They're gonna crash the game with Blade Swarms. They're gonna be big mad. So probably, yeah, core classes with quickness and alacrity, probably not a good idea. But yeah, that's it. I think we've locked it in.
Yeah, all of these nice looking classes, and I'm still playing Virtuoso and P Chrono only. So that's my personal take on that.
Yes. I like that. Do you like the Chrono auto attack, Emmy? You like the sword auto attack right now?
For context, I told him this before we went live. Someone did the test, and apparently right now, weapon stowing before you finish the 3rd auto attack gets you more damage than actually just finishing the auto attack chain, because something, I don't know, like the auto attack takes too long for the amount of damage that it does. So it's actually better to weapon stow. So all the people who cancel their auto attack chains, I've been like saying this so much whenever people come and ask me for like rotation help and everything. They're the ones who are rising up. It's buffing the casual players in a way that people weren't expecting before. So yeah, that part's a bit unfortunate. But
Oh, and you know, kind of on that note, I actually think this is something that ArenaNet do need to think about. And look, okay. Are you ready for some weird esoteric game mechanics, guys? Okay, we've got to talk about aftercasts. So aftercasts in Guild Wars 2 are a little bit of an animation after you're done casting a skill before you can do another action. Now, here's the questionable part, is that you can cancel that and go on to your next action immediately by basically button mashing. Really good example of this is that if you go and look at a Reaper benchmark right now, okay, oh god, what they'll be doing is after every Gravedigger, they'll be mashing 1 to cancel the aftercast, and then immediately Gravedigger again. And this is actually a significant DPS increase, okay? And this is true in quite a lot of classes. For example, you know what? I'm leaking it. I'm leaking it. I'm leaking this right now.
He's gonna say it.
I'm leaking I am leaking the ultimate mech. You guys thought mech was easy. Then let me tell you a secret, guys. Did you guys know that if you cancel the aftercast of rifle auto attack and you cancel the aftercast of every single one of your mech's auto attacks, it's like a 6k DPS increase? Did you know that? Well, now you do know that, right? And that's how strong this is. I'm not quibbling over 200 DPS or 300 DPS, guys. I'm quibbling over thousands of DPS. And the problem with this is that this is something that almost no player is going to engage in, but it's also like insanely important to do on certain builds, otherwise your effectiveness gets memed. Oh, and by the way, guys, on the mech thing, this is how disgusting this is. I don't think anyone would even try and pull this off. Maybe someone who's like completely unhinged would try this. Basically, the mech, it fires with its left arm, then with its right arm, and has a long aftercast before the next one. So you do you watch your mech, and every time your mech fires with its right arm, you pull the mech back using the F7 that returns to you, then immediately attack again, and that cancels the aftercast on the mech auto attack. Yeah, that's big. It's content, by the way. But that's memes, and you can get a lot of numbers. You can get some big numbers. But yeah, it's a bit of an issue. I think that ArenaNet should think about is how they want to handle this in the game. It's hard to fix it, right? It's a little bit difficult to how you'd go about doing it, because if you make it so you can't cancel aftercasts, ooh, that's gonna be very, very rough. I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one.
Theoretically, couldn't you just change the hits so the actual damage dealt happens later into the animation, and then you could increase the overall, like, you know how like on the tooltips it tells you like how long it takes to cast the skill? You could increase that, or theoretically you could just speed up the entire animation. I feel like that would be probably the quote unquote easiest. I'm not one of their developers, so I can't say for sure, but I feel like that would be the most intuitive way of doing it. It's just speed up the animation.
Maybe you should fix it.
I mean, okay, yeah. I actually live like 20 minutes from the ArenaNet headquarters. I'll just drive over right now and be like, hey, can I offer my services for today? I'll offer you an hourly rate and everything, and I'll fix it for you. So, yeah. But I feel like that would have to be the easiest way, because I think completely reworking the animation and making it so that you can't finish the animation always feels really bad. And actually, I have this criticism with a lot of classes that aren't Mesmer, because I feel like Mesmer does it really well, is that the animation cancels that you can do is pretty significant, and it makes the entire class feel a lot more fluid, if that makes any sense. But on a lot of other classes, the one I'm going to use as an example is Dragon Hunter with Greatsword. Like your Greatsword 4 feels really bad and your Greatsword 5 both feel really bad, and it's actually part of like the benchmark to weapon stow, so that you weapon stow or move so that you cancel those animations, because it locks you in place and it feels really, really, really bad. So I feel like it would, I think just in general, if some of the animations were maybe like sped up a little bit, and like the timing of the actual hit fits like almost like a rhythm, if that makes any sense. I feel like when a class has pretty consistent animations and like I guess like hit times, it contributes to making it feel a lot more fluid than a class that might have one instant cast and then another cast that takes like an extra 2 seconds, and then like another cast where like if you like try to cancel it early, you're just going to straight up cancel the entire skill, and it just feels very inconsistent that way. So, yeah.
This was kind of a thing in Elder Scrolls recently, I think. Like, Elder Scrolls Online had this thing where animation canceling became like a huge part of like the skill ceiling. And so all the really tired people were going really hard on animation cancels and stuff like that. But apparently it was kind of unintended. It wasn't really a thing that the devs originally intended for you to do. And I believe this is almost like a year ago. They tried to sort of like get rid of it, and then the community was upset. They were not having it. They were like, "Oh my gosh, this is a part of the game. We want to keep our animation cancels." I feel like it's one of those things that's actually is kind of almost like a fundamental issue in a way, because it sort of like makes the gap between like the really tryhard players and the more casual players quite large, right? So something I actually really want to see isn't necessarily to do with Aftercast, but there was this thread on the subreddit like 2 weeks ago where someone talked about how they wanted the final auto attack in the chain to have like a slightly different color cost bar.
Yes.
That would be nice.
I feel like that would be so good, because like there's a bunch of people in chat right now probably who are like, oh, that just look at the animation, just look at the thing, like you can get a feel for it, and that's totally true. You can totally be fine with not so for everyone that's not necessarily following, basically usually you want to finish your auto attack chain. You usually want to make sure you get that third skill because it hits harder. Apparently not on Chrono Monster right now though, apparently. But I feel like that's one of those things that would make the gap smaller. One of those things that would just make it a little bit easier for new players to start getting into these slightly more complicated mechanics, like aftercast canceling, making sure you don't interrupt your auto attack chains and stuff like that. So in a way, what I would want to see is them not necessarily getting rid of it, but just like coming up with these like nice tools to make it a bit more approachable if you're new.
Yeah,
because I feel like 90% of the Guild Wars 2 player base doesn't actually like think about that stuff at all. Like if you're not, you know, like reading some SC page or like browsing the subreddit or in like a guild with a lot of tired people, you probably just don't even think about it. So just making it a bit more approachable would be nice. Also, I always cancel my auto attack chains, so I would like that.
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
bad at it.
Yeah, I honestly completely agree. I mean, they did do this for something different, right? With the CC skills, like whenever there's a defiance bar and you have a CC skill available, it like makes it blink a little bit. I think just having a visual cue to draw people's attention to a specific thing, that's like a pretty core tenet of just in general, like UI UX design, right? It's like you don't want important information to be overshadowed by less important information. And I feel like the third auto attack chain, I completely agree with this, because anytime somebody asks me for one-on-one help with, and like they send me like their logs and stuff, almost always the very, very first thing that I always check is, are they finishing their auto attack chains? Especially if they're playing a class like Scourge, where like the third hit is like honestly the bulk of your damage when it comes to like benching and stuff. If they're not finishing the third auto attack chain, you're actually cutting your outgoing damage by probably 10% at minimum, probably more in an actual functional fight, where in a lot of situations you might be ranged or you might not have that much damage uptime. Your auto attacks are super, super, super like powerful. So to have that information kind of just be kind of like squished to the side. And honestly, it's even worse because when you're in combat and you mouse over your auto attack, it only shows the auto attack that you're currently on. Whereas if you're out of combat and you mouse over, it shows all three, right? But realistically, which new player is going to sit there mousing over their auto attack to see like what exactly the third auto attack does, right? I think actually a pretty significant chunk of new players don't even know that there's like that third auto attack is like so powerful. So anyways, TLDR, I completely agree. I think they should add better visual clarity on certain things. Speaking of visual clarity, you know what they should fix? The buff bar. It's been overflowing. It overflows all the way to the end now.
Especially on Firebrand now, by the way.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Like when I saw that they added the red icons for Firebrand, I was like, oh my god, I have to like, there's 3 more I have to keep track of. Yeah. I think the buff
we're in the danger zone here. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, I think this is probably one of the reasons why I think people are gonna stray away from stuff that have a lot of these internal cooldown style abilities, stuff like Untamed, new Firebrand, right? It's kind of annoying, right? And the thing is, it's also pretty important, right? Especially now, this is a really interesting thing about new Firebrand, is that you can kind of use your Tome of Courage as a free Aegis, right? You can just, boom, go in there and activate it. It's actually really important that you understand when that ability is up and when you can use your Unleashed ability on Untamed, for example. But managing internal cooldowns in Guild Wars Wars 2 is pain because there's no UI customization. If you're playing World of Warcraft, no problem. I'm gonna get you a weak aura for that, right? And it's going to be really easy to manage that internal cooldown. But in Guild Wars 2, it's going to be a tiny little icon in a buff bar surrounded by other buffs, including banners as well, right? Just there for some random reason. Like, I don't know. I mean, I actually really hate to say this, but I am actually not sure if ArenaNet can really fix this because I think adding UI customization would probably be so much work. We already know that they suffer with the interface. The interface is pain, right? For them to modify anything with. This is going to sound like pretty unhinged, but I almost feel like it would be easier if they basically just allowed users to do this a little bit more. The reason I say this is because there actually are already community-developed add-ons that do this. There's something, well, I won't actually say the name, I don't want to get in trouble. But there are a few add-ons that can track stuff like if you have Zealot's Flame, which is the internal cooldown on Guardian, Condi Guardian, with the extra Torch 4 activation that you get. And that's actually really useful. You can have that right in the middle of your screen, and it's right there, and you press the button, and it's really, really easy. You can see all of your boons, all of your buffs. It's right there, guys. You can do it. The problem is that this isn't an official API, right? This isn't an official thing that players are using. They're being a little bit naughty, pretty much, to make that happen. But it's obviously harmless, and it's an incredibly powerful tool to make the game a little bit more visual. That's not really something to do with balance, but it is definitely something that I think really holds players back. Yeah, stuff like auto attack, stuff like internal cooldowns, even stuff like cooldowns within stuff like kits, right? That's definitely a really big sticking point. I think that's what a lot of players struggle with Engineer and maybe even Elementalist as well, and now Firebrand too, is that you have to manage these cooldowns that you can't see the entire time, which is actually that's probably going to be very difficult for players to kind of get into, right? And a lot of these things raise the skill floor, right? And that's kind of like the wrong type of skill that you want in the game. You want things to be easy to learn, hard to master, rather than hard to learn and also hard to master, right? There has to be like a nice smooth ramp for players to get in on the action, right? Which in some ways ArenaNet have been doing a good job of. You know, for example, I have to get this in here. It's got to be on this TeaTime. Guys, you know what? Everyone got what they wanted. Ellie is now one of the easiest DPS classes to play. That's actually true, by the way. Both Power and Condi Weaver are extremely easy. In fact, Power Weaver just uses fire and air mostly. There's like a 39k DPS benchmark with only fire and air. And Condi Weaver is a ranged DPS build that basically just uses fire and earth, just saying. A little bit of a bonus meme for you there. But of course, you can still really get into high level play, right? And push all the DPS to the limit on some of the more advanced rotations too. And ArenaNet's been doing a great job with that. But there are some systemic issues that need to be looked at, I think, with a few things that just make the game a little bit harder to learn and understand.
I feel like it's good to happen. Like, you know, they've been doing a lot of quality of life stuff recently. A lot of quality of life stuff specifically to make the game like easier to learn for new players. I could totally see them. Again, it's a bigger issue. You can't just fix this with one thing. But like, for example, this auto attack change, I could totally see that. There's a couple of ones that I feel like have a pretty good chance. So I've hope.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. Or maybe we just start hacking.
No.
Yes.
Yours 2 mods. We need more mods.
Meter.dll is back on the menu.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess actually I was thinking for the auto attack chain one, there's a pretty easy thing they could do. They could just change the color. Just like that, like if I imagine there's probably just some sort of artwork that's being loaded whenever that skill like is popping up on the or on the buff bar, or I can't wait, on the weapon bar. Yeah, if probably not green because that's like related to a class or something like that, but maybe making like a bit brighter, like a whiter color compared to the other ones, like I don't know, something like that. So even just visually, just having an indicator that pulls your attention to it. Since I'm pretty sure I speak pretty universally for a lot of like Guild 2 players, their eyes are glued to their like bar anyways, or on their skills anyways, right? Like if they're staring at their skills, they're probably only looking at like maybe 10% of the information on the entire screen. If they just change one of the little icons there, it would probably immediately pull their attention to it. But yeah.
Do you know what I'd like to see?
Like the yellow cost bar be like red or something on the first one. That totally would work too.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking earlier about how there's a lot of inertia to the metagame, and how I think a lot of players maybe don't even realize that their build might have got stronger, for example. You know, I was thinking, oh, you know, ArenaNet could just tell you what the builds are in the game. But you know what they could do? They could hide, when you log into your character for the first time after a patch, they could highlight skills that have been buffed and say, like, look, we made this skill better. Wow. Or something like that, so that players actually know that their skill has become stronger. Just thinking, because then they kind of do this in Hearthstone, right? Like when cards get changed or buffed or nerfed, when you log into the game for the first time after a patch, it will kind of tell you that this has happened. And I think kind of communicating to users what's changed in quite visual way is really important, because I don't think everyone reads the patch notes. In fact, I don't think that many people read the patch notes, to be honest. And so I think players might not know that, like, oh shit, my class is hyped now. This is crazy. I do mega DPS. I'm pumping. That could be something that they could look at. Or, you know, maybe we just have to stream more. You know, now I'm going to have to force Emmy to play something that isn't Mesmer. We've got to show off the joys of Catalyst, the joys of Vindicator, you know? It's the only way.
Honestly, you know what I think is an issue with the patch notes? I know you've actually been working on this, but the fact that there's no icons, you know, you just see the names. So people see like all the names of like skills and like, I don't know what that is. Just scroll past. But you've got this really fancy website that you've been using. I saw that, where it just shows like all the skill icons next to the balance notes.
Yeah.
I need something like that.
Yeah. I was actually going to say, one of the other games that I played does this, or they don't do it directly in game, but what they do for every balance patch that they have is they have a bit of a graphic. So they put the icons and they just put like a little green arrow or like facing up or a red arrow facing down. And they have like a brief summary, like buffed classes, nerfed classes, reworked classes, or like something like that with little like the number, like the amount that they buffed it is like the number of arrows. So if they buff something really hard, they do like 3 green arrows. If they nerf something really hard, they do like 3 red arrows.
Yes.
Something like that would be really cool if they could just have like a summary for it, like a very visual summary that they post on Twitter or post on the forums or like, I don't know, post on wherever, like if whenever they do like the live stream, the balanced live streams, just like a quick visual summary that takes 1 page would be really, really nice. So the game I'm referencing, people probably already know, is Team Fight Tactics. So every time they do like a balance patch, they always have like the icons of like the characters that they've buffed or nerfed. So I think that would be like really cool. And then also, if we're talking about Bladesworn, I owe everybody a Bladesworn only week because we met a charity goal. So I'll have to step away from Mesmer eventually. But
yeah.
It's fun.
Yes.
I like
that is
Bladesworn.
interesting. That is big.
Yeah, I think that would just be
Bladesworn. Martial Cadence. Are there any Martial Cadence fans in the chat? Because there are a few things that people complain to me about. This is, again, incredibly unrelated, but this is just a slightly amusing story. Here's something that did happen recently. There was a bug in the game. I'm not sure how many people know about this, but there was a bug in the game where if you do normal mode, Harvest Temple, the illegibility for Voidwalker shows up. Okay? You don't get Voidwalker. So that's why I can say this, because you don't actually get Voidwalker. But the illegibility shows up. And this caused a lot of people to become unhinged and spam me, saying, this must be fixed now, otherwise Voidwalker will become worthless. And it's the exact same thing with Martial Cadence. You know, players harass me saying, you must force ArenaNet to nerf Martial Cadence, so our speedruns with 8 Bladesworns can have things that aren't 8 Bladesworns in. Speaking of Bladesworns. There you go.
I feel like I feel like 50% of the people spamming you is Nike. Like it's just a guess.
I mean,
like,
Nike's a warrior main. He likes it. He, you know, that's what he wants. He wants only Bladesworns. Yeah. So that's a little bit different, but it's content. Martial Cadence is a good skill. It is a very, very good trait. And I think it really highlights why having quickness and alacrity on core classes is probably not a very good idea. It's not the play. It's not the way to go, my friends, whatsoever. Because it causes a lot of balance issues. But, yeah. Oh, no, I don't know where I was going with that. I just wanted to bring that up because it amused me. And people were panicking. They were in fear that Voidwalker will become Noobwalker. That's how it is. Yeah. Balance patch is good, though, actually. I'm a big enjoyer. I'm a big enjoyer of this balance patch.
Same.
I cannot wait to see more of it, and I hope we still see reworks. And it's going to be a bumpy ride because there are going to be some reworks that do work. There are going to be some reworks that don't, like the Scrapper one, for example. But what's important to understand is that there is this mentality, I think, with balance patches, and understandably, I don't blame people for thinking this way. In fact, it's quite rational. It's that, no, my class got nerfed. That means it's like this for 9 months, maybe even a year, maybe even more than a year. No! Right, and why do people think that? Well, yeah, because as it turns out, ArenaNet used to do like one balance patch a year. Sometimes they would just do nothing, right? And yeah, if your class got nerfed, you're in the shit and you're nerfed for over a year. That could absolutely happen. But the thing is, and I hope this has started to actually happen now, and I think it has a little bit, is that ArenaNet are being very responsive, right? They posted the patch notes, and people said, oh, they didn't buff Weaver that much. Oh, Reaper only got buffed by 7%. Oh. And then do you know what they did? Yeah, they buffed it more, right? And they made Weaver really strong, actually, as it turns out. And it's like, oh, where were the Weaver buffs? Well, here are the Weaver buffs. Here they are. Have a lot more damage. And Arena are being responsive, and they're also doing patches much more frequently. So if things aren't super perfect, or they aren't there yet for a particular profession, then it's okay because it's going to get looked at in 3 months' time. Right, it's going to get looked at, maybe even sooner, right? Sometimes it will be hotfixed, right? And they'll hotfix it, right? And then away you go. So that's something that's really important to understand. And also, reworks, the fact that ArenaNet are actually willing to look at Firebrand and say, okay, we're actually going to fundamentally change it. This is actually really good news. Because I'm going to tell you gamers a little bit of a secret. One of the reasons why certain builds dominate is because of their design, and you don't fix that with numbers. Great example is mech, by the way. Mechanist, heal Mechanist, specifically heal mech, power mech, whatever. That was never really a balance issue. No, not a big one, right? You just nerf the numbers and power mech is fine, right? And that's exactly what they did. But support mech was the big problem, right? And in some ways it kind of still is, but they literally halved the barrier pretty much on mech, and it survived. And this is this nuanced topic around design versus numbers. If a class can survive a 50% numbers nerf, there is something going wrong there, and it's not the numbers. Okay? It's the fact that there's something about this class that is very strong just on a mechanical fundamental level. Because the numbers on mech are pretty mediocre, actually. And they always were, in a way, right? They weren't insane. For example, Druid has always healed more than mech. Tempest has always healed more than mech. But then, wait a minute. Why was mech so strong? Why was it so powerful? Well, it's because it turns out that being able to run away to Narnia and do a mechanic while your mech is just doing its thing, passively pumping out boons, is really strong on a fundamental level, right? And there was a bit of a kind of a band-aid fix to mech by making that significantly less effective. I'm actually pretty certain they're going to look at that in the future. The implementation isn't ideal. I doubt ArenaNet is happy with it. But design changes are necessary to make the game better and more balanced. If you want a meta that actually shifts stuff and moves stuff away, like Firebrand and mech, and keeps fluid and isn't just static with the same classes showing up every single time, then you need to accept design changes. Otherwise, you'll never dislodge these professions. It's just never going to happen unless you nuke them from orbit, right, and make them completely unplayable. So design changes are essential. I really hope that we see a design change with every single patch, because believe me, there's a lot of things in the game that have some pretty severe design issues that until they get fixed in some way, there'll always be a really big problem to balance. And let me give you a positive example rather than a nerf example, because look, I can be, because it works both ways too. I would say that Daredevil in particular, in PvE, the design change that, or the balance problem that Daredevil has is that it's incredibly balanced around its steal skills in raids. So you're either pretty mediocre or you're absolutely disgustingly broken, right? That's a problem. That means you can't really buff Daredevil until that design issue is resolved, right? Because otherwise, if you do end up buffing Daredevil to make it like really good everywhere, then here's the problem. You're going to make it so repulsively, disgustingly broken in certain scenarios that it breaks the game fundamentally, right? A really good example of this is the Ecto that you can use. You can also use the magnetic bombs, are also insanely strong on certain raid encounters. That's a big design issue. But this would be a design change that would essentially buff Daredevil to make it stronger. Because a lot of the times when we talked about design, it's to nerf things. It's to make mech worse, to make Firebrand a little bit less versatile, right? It's to make Scourge less oppressive aggressive as a DPS, etc., etc., etc. But design can also be used in a positive way to remove a weakness from a profession or to make it more playable in some way. A really good example of that would be looking at supports, right? So making the quickness application on Scrapper less spammy, looking at the application of Alacrity on Spectre, for example, or on Druid with Spirits. Druid right now, one of the things that kind of holds it back compared to, say, a mech is that you have to mash all your spirits. And even though, by the way, kind of a fun fact here, Druid is actually better than mech, I'd say, in general, this patch, but that's not the point. It still has some usability and playability issues that can only be resolved by design. You can't fix Druid's playability issues by saying, oh yeah, you get more Alacrity now. You need to look at the design there and fix it. So this is why reworks are good, and this is why I hope that it continues.
Yep.
Dude.
I actually have some thoughts on that. It's quite a long monologue.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on fire today. I'm writing some speeches.
Yeah. But I was like kind of referencing it earlier when we were talking about like how I would personally rework like Firebrand a little bit by taking a look at the weapons and making sure that the weapons have a functional use and not just a damage use.
Mhm.
I think this is kind of true like everywhere, because I think part of the reason why like certain weapons on classes feel very underutilized is because they're doing the same thing as another weapon, except worse or better or with a different animation. In other words, the skills actually feel very, very samey, right? It's like at the end of the day, you have a circle that's doing damage over time or maybe instantaneously, or you have a single target effect that's doing damage either over time or like instantaneously, or you have a heal skill that's healing people in a circle over time or instantaneously. It feels very much the same, right? So I feel like the classes that really shine is when functionally they bring something to the table that other classes are not able to, right? So like an example that I would use again is going to be Mesmer, because I play a lot of Mesmer. Focus pull is very, very notorious as being as like you bring focus on very specific encounters. People don't say you bring Mesmer. You bring focus, because focus is the reason why it's so good. Like just the instantaneous 600 range pull in all directions is extremely powerful, right? Even if the damage is not the best, even though it is very, very good, you bring it specifically for the functionality, right? And then like kind of like the same thing, it's like when you think, oh, I need like a bubble or something like that, right? Like that's why like Herald is so good right now. It's like when you need a permanent uptime on a bubble, you don't say, oh, you can bring CPC, you can use Tome 3 on Firebrand, or you can like, I don't know, use feedback on Mesmer. Like these are all options. But at the end of the day, if you're doing severe CM, you're probably going to want to have a Revenant with you that can just keep up a permanent bubble. I think having this kind of like core functionality tied to a class makes it kind of fit into its own niche, which I think in turn makes it a lot more fun to play. And obviously we don't need it to be like on that scale where it's like you have this permanent bubble that only this one specific class can bring, and like this is the only viable option that you can have if you want to clear this specific encounter super smoothly. Like I don't think that's healthy either. But I think if you look at it a little bit smaller scale within the class itself, it's like, why would you ever bring like, I don't know, a shield on a class when that shield doesn't give you anything except maybe a little bit of like alacrity or quickness? So I'm thinking like Chrono Shield right now. Like Chrono Shield is kind of in shambles because it only gives you buffs and it gives you the block, but Chrono is already overloaded on blocks anyways, right? Like you have your distorts, you have like your sword offhand, you have your evades on your sword, you have all of these other options. So it doesn't really feel quite as necessary. So I think that would be really interesting for them to look at. But on the other hand, I also understand the other side, because someone actually brought this up to me yesterday during my stream. They were like, constant reworks also feels bad because then it makes people afraid to commit, right? It's like, then you think, okay, well, if they're going to be reworking this class anyways, if they're still tuning this class anyways, then I should probably not play it until it's in its finished state, right? It's like people have this kind of mentality for everything, not just Guild Wars 2. So then it's kind of like, okay, well, if this class is constantly being retuned and reworked and like, you know, constantly having like the numbers being changed or like the buffs being changed or its functionality being changed, then why should I learn it now when it's just going to be changed later? So I think that's also super important.
Yeah, it's definitely get it right and then leave it, right? As opposed to keep changing it. I think that's definitely a very Mesmer thing, right? I still remember the days where it was like Mesmer would get fully reworked every 3 months or so.
Every patch, 4 years.
That was so funny.
My biggest gripe, not even with endgame PvE. You want to know a offhand way that it was affected, that affected me in particular, not that many other people?
Oh, really?
I used to run HV trains in open world, and you used to be able to do 3 portals because you can mimic, or you could continuum split your mimic, and then you could drop a 3rd portal, and then you could get 20 extra people through in your HV train. I can't do that anymore. I have to wait 30 stinking minutes on the white mantle portal device to get the third portal if I need to, or refresh it twice with the Adrenal Mushroom.
Yeah, you've been
And then
memed.
they reworked to like mimic like 3 times. They reworked SOI like 3 times. They reworked the inspiration trait line like a bajillion times. They reworked the. I'm just gonna stop because I'm just gonna make myself upset.
Yeah, you got farmed. You know, the balance patch won. That's just the way it goes sometimes. But yeah, no, that's why I think it definitely is. Make sure the design is good. Get feedback on it. Make sure it's actually going to solve the problem. Because ultimately, what happened with Mesmer is that they didn't solve the problem, right? They tried to change Signet of Inspiration or just the Inspiration trait line again and again and again, and it didn't work, right? It was still insane. In fact, I think the Signet of Inspiration thing was an absolute clown fiesta because it basically gave birth to Chaos Chrono, right? Like the most disgusting Chrono build ever made.
Chaos Chrono great again.
You know, it's actually crazy. We're in such an era of power creep that it would be really good, but it wouldn't even be that broken right now if you had a build like that. It would be pretty broken, but it wouldn't be insane, actually, because of just like where the game is right now. Like, supports are really strong. Really, really, really strong in the current meta. But yeah, no, I completely agree with what you said about... oh yeah, go ahead, Lara.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point because, like, I think a lot of us veterans, we have legendaries. So it's like, oh, well, this build is good now. Now we just, bam, gear it up, 2 seconds, done. But that's almost goes back to that inertia we were talking about a while back, right? I think a large reason why people want to stick with their claws is just because it takes a while to gear it up. I kind of forgot how painful it is to, like, gear up a build if you don't have legendaries. It takes you a while, especially if you're not really into, like, raiding very much yet and you don't have a million magnetite shards ready to go. It's like, gearing is actually a little bit of a pain. In a way, I actually think the game would be better if more people had access to legendaries. Like, just if more people could, like, easily swap their gear and easily swap their stats. I almost think the game would just be more fun and be almost, like, better, genuinely. This is like, I always hear people talking about like PvE legendary armor, and there's like people going like, well, I don't really like raids, I still want to get legendary armor somehow.
Yes.
I want open world legendary armor. And you know, at first I was like, no, it's like, it's a cool raiding thing, like it's the reward from raids. But at this point I'm like, honestly, the more people have legendary armor, probably the better. Like, I genuinely think that's having more access to like, or like, doesn't even have to be legendaries, but just like, even if it's just like easier ascended access, easier stat swapping. I mean, stat swapping is pretty simple already, but oh my gosh, I used to main Chrono during these days, when like
the dark
Chrono got,
times.
like, reverse every you know, like the worst part is when I like, there were like leadership runes which were like meta, and you had to like farm dragon stands. And like, I had literally just farmed them, and then like 2 days later they weren't meta anymore. That hurt. That hurt a lot.
They were so expensive on launch. They were so expensive on launch.
I still use that. Yeah, and I can like think of all of the different variants of like Mesmer there were. There's like Commander's gear, there was like Diviner's gear for a while, Berserker's gear, and then this random weird mix of Assassins and Berserkers. And then there was like, I don't even know, you could run like Minstrels, you could run Givers, like there are 1,000,001 different stat combinations that you could use. That was the sole reason why I made my first set of legendary armor. So I didn't have to keep on stat swapping things for Mesmer. But I think back to the point though, I think that's actually a really good point. I think they've been introducing more ways to get the legendary trinkets, right? Like for example, the legendary amulet, you used to only be able to get that from PvP. But now there's a pretty easy long-term goal for that with PvE, which I think is really healthy. And then I think also like with the rings and stuff, right? Like you have the World vs. World rings with, I think that's Conflux or something like that. And then you have the Wing 5 one, where I forget what it's called, the Hateful Swirl one, whatever that one is. So that would be like another example where you have multiple options to choose them. So I think doing or adding maybe a little bit of a spicy take, because I saw someone saying you could add legendary armor to strike missions. Personally, I think that's a little bit redundant because functionally strike missions and raids are kind of the same thing. You're just learning different types of encounters, but it's still 10-man content. I would personally, actually, I'm a bigger proponent for open world legendaries, but having it be a significantly longer grind. So I always tell people this when they ask me like which like legendary sets should they use? And I always tell them it depends on how much time and how much effort you want to put into it. Because realistically, with the PvE armor, you could get it done in 6 weeks. If you get a full clear every single week and you put in a lot of time into like pugging it or training it or whatever it is, you can get all of your gear finished in 6 weeks from beginning to end. On the other hand, with World vs. World and PvP, it's going to take you 6 weeks to get one piece of gear. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, especially if you don't have a good way to farm up pips. So like if you're very new to like World vs. World or something like that, it's going to take you a very, very, very long time to get that gear. But it's still something that you can eventually get that's relatively low effort. So I think having an option like that for open world, where let's say like you have to kill like world bosses, or you have to do certain jumping puzzles, or you have to like, I don't know, map complete a certain amount of times or something like that, it would be a very nice long-term grind for people that want to stay casual in the game. So.
Showers of tears for every piece. For every piece you have to do showers of tears.
I got enough tickets for my Vault 3 Vault ring this week. After like a
Well
year. I'm so proud. It took a long
but it
time.
took a long time. Yeah. I think honestly, I personally find that to be a very fair trade-off. It's like if you wanted the prestige and the speed of getting like the PvE legendary armor, which requires you to get pretty significant number of raid kills, I think that's a worthwhile trade-off than doing something for a significantly longer period of time, but you end up getting to around the same rewards. So yes, every piece needs a gift of
I think it's also worth noting that the raid armor is still the only animated armor set in the game. It's always gonna have that. I mean, yeah, you have like tentacles, but it's not the level of detail that raid armor is.
That's true.
Something that is worth noting.
There's also
as well.
the title, right? If you get all the free
all
armors,
of it,
there's the title.
I don't even have that. I have one set from each game mode. Too lazy to do anything else. Yeah. So I think there is that that's worth noting, and realistically, it probably will stay unique. I don't think there will be any more armor sets like that. I think it was an absolute nightmare for them to add raid armor to the game, or like that type of legendary armor. It's pretty unlikely. I hate to say it, maybe you'd see something like that in the cash shop, but other than that, I don't think it will be in the game again. So raid armor will always have that, which is pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
But I completely agree. I think gear access is a huge problem in the game. And this is where it gets really tricky, because there's kind of business model stuff here where we're kind of going to be rubbing up against ArenaNet here. You can get a full exotic set of Berserker gear for 5 gold on the trading post. That is less gold than 1 piece of certain gear types. And you can't even get stuff like Ritualist, which is actually a really important gear type for certain builds, right? So obviously, builds like Spectre, for example, that really love Ritualist gear are going to be far less prevalent, even though they're really strong, right? Because you have to get Ritualist gear, which sucks, right? It's really frustrating to deal with. That's a really big problem. I really think ArenaNet need to look at this. I've been saying this since the start of EOD. Oh, this is so true of Dragon stats, by the way, because you know all those power classes that people think are like super, super difficult? Dragon stats actually help out with this. Like you can end up getting an extra few thousand, like 5,000 hit points on certain power builds with Dragon stats, right? That's such a big deal. That's such a huge deal. You can be like, 50% tankier, right, on a full DPS build. Right, with Dragon stats. But they're so painful to get alongside Ritualist gear. Why? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Why is it like this? I think it's because they really want you to engage with certain Ender Dragons content, but I mean, it's such a bad trade-off. Like, the game is so much worse because you can't easily access stuff like Dragon gear and Ritualist gear. There's no reason for it to be that way. Like, especially when you're giving away stuff like Celestial, but it's like, pain. So yeah, looking at gear access, looking at legendary access, I think is definitely really important, for sure. I'd love to see like an open world or like a season 6, right? Living Story season 6 legendary armor set. I think that'd be really cool, to get added to the game there. It also, I think, would really help with new player retention. Players get lost, right? They go, what am I supposed to be doing in this game again? Well, the answer is legendaries a lot of the time, right? Is working towards these legendary items. So introducing players to that concept with Season of the Dragons, with the amulet, and then potentially some armor or even a weapon maybe, from Living World, I think that'll be really good. I think that would be fantastic, to go about that. And yeah, obviously it helps with gearing too. I'd love to see Ascended drop more as well. I'm not gonna lie, this thing I've been really enjoying on my Zero to Hero is you do fractals and then boom, you get an Ascended chest, right? There's something about that that I prefer a million times over to going to a vendor and then going, okay, I'm gonna trade in my shards now. Here we go. Like I wanna open the loot and boom, there's an ascended chest. You know what I'm saying? Let's go. I do Su-1, boom. Living you get the living water sword from doing Dragon's End Merriment. I think that's really cool. And it also kind of gets players on that treadmill of understanding what the items are that they're looking for, right? That kind of stuff is fun. It is enjoyable. So yeah, gear access, definitely important. And add End of Dragons runes. Just gonna throw that in there.
Oh, like the runes for the class professionals?
Yes.
And stuff? Mm.
2 new
Okay,
rules
honestly-
per episode of season 6.
Maybe a little bit of a hot take. I'm actually kind of glad that they didn't. I feel like I already get dizzy like thinking about all of the different rune options that you have in the game. Like sometimes you use thief runes, sometimes you use elementalist runes, a nightmare, tormenting, whatever it's called. Like I don't know. I actually think having less bloat in the game with all of these other runes and stuff it can be very dizzy, even for me. But again, I'm a one-trick player, so that might be a contributing reason why. But I like to think that a lot of new players are in a similar situation, right? It's like they're also, probably only playing one class since it takes a lot of time to like gear up that class and everything. So all of the gear bloat is also probably very confusing for them. Honestly, I feel the same with like stat bloat. I feel like there's like a lot of stat combinations that are pretty much useless. I think most people that run them are running it accidentally. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. That's what we like to see. It is definitely a problem. You don't want to make things a little bit over the top. That's probably why they decided not to add them, in addition to the potential balance issues, right? Imagine what Rune of the Mechanist would have looked like. Oh, yes. Just think about that. Funnily enough, an alacrity rune would actually be really good. Rune of the Firebrand is very strong, right? And having an alacrity duration rune. And look, think about poor old Renegade right now, gamers. It's like 80% duration is what you need to give alacrity. That's so sad. That's so much.
Actually, I do want to talk about this because this was brought up in my Discord recently. I think in raids, alacrity Renegade feels really bad, but I play a lot of fractals still. I will still take an alacrity Renegade over an alacrity Mechanist any day of the week. I feel like just the amount of like they can bring road, which pretty much fixes all of your stability problems. Like in the short phases that happen in fractals, they bring a metric fuck ton of CC. Like that's a lot of CC that a renegade is able to bring, and also their burst is really high. If you can time, I think it's your F3 skill on renegade with like full zerkers and stuff, because you get the extra boon duration from potions and stuff, right? So your gear is a little bit more flexible. You can straight up out DPS some of the DPS players if you align it right with the exposed fire. So I just kind of want to add in there all of the renegade players. I still see you. I still am very happy to see you inside of my fractal groups and everything. Those mechanist players can go sit in the corner. So
wow.
Yes.
Whoa. Whoa.
I just make the herald do it. I just make the herald take that stuff.
Yes.
Oh, that's true. Okay, that is true. Nowadays with quickness
It's
herald.
so strong. I can't believe it's even stronger now. Herald is weird.
That is actually a really fascinating nuance of balance actually in Guild Wars 2 right now. Is that if you take this is so weird. Professions compete against themselves, right? So I think one that's really interesting to think about here is actually stuff like Heal Herald versus Power Herald, right? Like if you have one Herald, which one of those would you rather have? It turns out a lot of the time it's actually the Power Herald, the DPS Herald, and because you'd rather have an Alacrity healer, because it turns out that taking Alacrity is usually more painful than taking Quickness, right? You're going to sacrifice more with what your build does, and as a result of that, just slap it on the healer, and it's more efficient. It's kind of a bit of a problem, right? Like a lot of Quickness healers aren't as good as Alacrity healers, and that leads to a very skewed meta, because think about that, right? Well, if all of the healers give Alacrity, then, well, for a start, that makes all of the Quickness healers inherently weaker, because you aren't going to want to take them a lot of the time. But also, it means that all of the classes that synergize really well with the Alacrity healers get way better, and all of the Quickness classes that don't get way weaker. And that is another really interesting thing with the way balance works, right? Like Quickness and Alacrity almost need to be equal in how much of a trade-off they are with taking them. Otherwise, you end up with this inherent inequality where you're always going to want to play Alacrity healers, because Alacrity is more corrosive to your damage build in general, which tends to be the case right now outside of like very high level play, where you're very going to commonly see an Alacrity Spectre, but that's only because you are solo healing or zero healing sometimes, in fact. So yeah, that was another like random meme. As a final thing, I actually wanted to, you know, I wanted to go back in time, like 20 minutes in the conversation actually, and just bring up something that you brought up, Emmy, which I thought was huge brain, and then go even further. Okay, yeah, no one plays Mirage, guys. Okay, Mirage,
that back.
Mirage is like an arcane eldritch tome, and you have to speak demonic. Okay, nobody plays that, although it is actually very strong, guys. By the way, fun fact. But yeah,
buffs.
Yeah, Mirage is very strong, actually. And it did get buffed, kind of. Not exactly, but yeah, stacks Mirage, not so much. But yeah, Mirage is pretty hype, especially if you want to do the frog in Verdant Brink. That's where Mirage really pops off, okay?
Yeah.
But anyway, now we're going back in time. Because you mentioned that buffing, looking at core weapons and making sure they're functionally distinct and powerful is really important. I 100% agree, especially seeing as one of the patches that did the most, in my opinion, was actually the patch that basically just buffed every core weapon in the game that didn't see play. That was amazing. It's really good. For example, Rifle could be really good on Warrior, because Warrior doesn't really have a super good ranged power option. You have Longbow for Condi, but not really for power. Boom. Rifle Warrior's on its way. This is one of the best ways to create new builds and new ways to approach the game as well, and can really help with balance, particularly because of how strong ranged DPS is. Do you know the easiest way, guys, to make a low-intensity build? Give it 900 or 1200 range. Congratulations, you now have a low-intensity build that basically everyone can be pretty effective on. You've massively reduced the skill floor on a build, is range. Because it turns out that being ranged is absolutely insane in Guild Wars 2, because movement is really strong. So there it is. But, you know, I'd go even further. I think you need to look at core utility skills as well to make sure they're looking good. Especially Elementalist. Look at our poor Ellie brethren over there. All your utility skills do nothing except maybe do some damage. That's not good. Low energy.
Completely agree. I'm going to shill Mesmer here a little bit again, because I think the Mesmer core skills are so good. Like being able to bring feedback for specific scenarios is really good. But even like mass invisibility, like the elite skill, so good. It's borderline like necessary for pretty much every single Harvest Temple CM group there is nowadays. Disenchanter, extremely good. Boon Rip along with really, really high DPS. All of the mantras, right? Like you have the power mantra, which is obviously damage, but then you have the stability mantra, you have the CC mantra. I think the Condi Cleanse mantra is kind of like whatever, but like it's still like you just have a lot of options, right? I think this is like what I was mentioning before. It makes the class feel really dynamic, especially at a really, really high level of play, because for new players, like, yeah, you can just run a specific Condi Virtuoso build, press 3 buttons and get a lot of damage and have fun with the encounter, right? But like if you've been playing the game for a really long time and you're in a position where you want to like be able to carry your teammates, I feel like Mesmer has a lot of options to do that. Like Mimic is great, Portal is great, like all of these CC skills are great, these utility skills are great. It's just it feels like every encounter, depending on like where the gaps are in your specific group, you can kind of bring that up a little bit more. Whereas I feel like I would argue the only class that I've ever really felt this way is actually Firebrand. I feel, or not Firebrand, Guardian. I feel like Guardian has also a lot of options. You have Advance, you have Stand Your Ground, you have different what's it called, CC options, right? Like you have Sanctuary or Hammer of Wisdom or Bane Signa or something like that, or you have different healing options, right? With either the regen mantra or like the bow of arrows or whatever it's called. So it's just, I guess, like the classes where you have a lot of options, especially in the core sets, feels really good to play, because it feels like you're actually having an impact on your team, and it makes you feel like you have an impact on the specific encounter. So yes.
Yeah, 100%. I really want to see purity of purpose be applied a little bit to weapon design, utility design, even heal skill design, actually. I think it's really cool that I saw a super cool run. It was a Harvest Temple challenge mode, no healer run. And that to me is like peak Guild Wars 2. Everyone was healing a little bit, like the mech was doing damage and had medkit. Firebrands were healing using their Tome of Resolve, right? You might have seen some healing turrets in there as well. The Revs will be healing as well a little bit there. You know, that kind of stuff is super cool. I love that. Like that is how peak Guild Wars 2, where everyone's kind of doing a little bit of everything, being really reactive, really responsive. That is what the game at its peak of interestingness really looks like. So I think looking at professions and making sure they have the option to do this is always important. Because right now, I'm not saying that glass cannons shouldn't exist. I'm totally fine with having your full DPS, every single skill on your bar does damage, everything is pumping. I think that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But I think that it would be really good to look at professions and make sure that they have the option to do something, right? A really fun example would be maybe the Catalyst heal skill, for example. If you use it while you're in Water Sphere, it heals your allies as well. So you have like you have the option to use it as a defensive heal, for example, right? So now Ellie has some kind of option to do that. A little bit like Wash the Pain Away, I guess. But you could, that might be too boring, but you could do something else, right? I really like the idea of making the elementals really healy, and you can use them to heal your allies too, even more than right now. And just, yeah, I think that every profession should have at least a few options to do this, because this really is the problem that you run into. This thing that Emmy said again, on point today, Emmy. Oh my God, huge brain, wrinkly brain. About how having the option to do something is inherently strong compared to just having no option to do it. Right? Because if you can do something that another profession can't, then you're inherently advantaged in a lot of situations in a way that there's just no option. You can't do it on certain professions. You can't perform certain actions and have certain utilities on different professions, which is a really big problem. That's a huge balance advantage to have that flexibility and have that versatility. The builds that typically see a lot of play are the most versatile. And you know, I'd encourage everyone to check this. And this is in every game mode, by the way. If you look at what really sees play, it's stuff like Scourge, Firebrand, Herald, Mechanist, every Mesmer build in the entire game, etc., 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 right? If you look at PvP, it's the things that do everything. It's Vindicator, Hollowsmith, Renegade, right? Stuff like Catalyst, Bladestorm when it was still really, really strong. In World versus World, it's the Scrappers that just does everything. It's stuff like Firebrand that does a little bit of everything. It's Scourge that does everything. It's Rev that does everything. It's Spellbreaker that does a lot of everything, right? These are the builds that really are powerful in the Guild Wars 2 meta. And it's definitely a double-edged situation here. Yeah, some builds do too much, but there's quite a lot of builds that don't do enough as well, right? That is something that also needs to be looked at. And this is particularly true in PvE, I think, where there are a lot of... I was putting together a list of all of the DPS classes that actually do something to the encounter and can actually affect the encounter for like the team builder we have on hardstuck.gg. You should definitely go check that out, by the way. It's pretty fun. And it turns out there actually aren't that many DPS classes that actually do anything useful, right? Like a lot of them just don't do anything, right? Which isn't inherently problematic, but at least having that option would be very nice and very helpful for the balance, I think.
I want more eddy utilities like that. I feel like a lot of classes are actually in a pretty good spot when it comes to that. Like, Necro has got a bunch of really good utilities, Engineer has got a bunch of good ones, and then Eddie, I'm like, most of them are just damage. Like, I guess like there's some cool stuff in like your conjure weapons and stuff, but it definitely feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between certain core classes having like this really versatile kit, you know, something like Stand Your Ground, something like Sanctuary being ridiculously broken as well. And then there's other ones and they just don't have those cool options. I feel like actually like core utilities are something that doesn't get balanced as much. I feel like just looking at balance patches, it's usually like very targeted at like this elite spec and then sometimes this core weapon. Maybe like just more core utility skills could be something good to focus on a little bit more. Actually, something I've noticed recently is with these, you know, with these big balance patches coming into the game, I almost like, I feel like there's so many balance patches now, which I really like. Like they're really fast with them, right? Like I was kind of surprised they were already doing a big balance patch again. It feels like the frequency is really going up. But this almost kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the start. I feel like also just the amount of like bugs has gone up with this balance as well. Yeah. I feel like there's a link here maybe.
I mean, changing stuff, right? If you change stuff, it does break, and that does mean that you gotta try and not do that. You know, you gotta try and fix it.
Equals more bugs.
This is a weird meme, but I'm not actually sure if this would help. I think one advantage that World of Warcraft has is they have a public test server, right? Where you can go on there and just test stuff. Yeah. Now, this would probably require a lot of work for ArenaNet, And I think it will be a bit of a nightmare because I think what they'd be really worried about is actually data mining. Basically, people having access to this different version of the game and being able to extract stuff and then leak it, right? And get access to stuff early.
Yeah.
So it will probably be really annoying to create this version of the game that just has the updated balance on it, but nothing else whatsoever. They'd probably have to create something entirely new for this. So maybe not, but no, like that might help. But that might not even help, by the way. I'm always reminded of this, of Raids, actually, when Raids came out. So there was a developer called Paul who was the lead raid designer back in the day. And he was very active in the community, would just come hang out with us and laugh at us when we die. And he said, oh yeah, you know, a lot of the bugs you're seeing here, yeah, they actually didn't appear on when we were testing them, right? Like, this was actually new. When we put it onto the live game, all hell broke loose, which isn't a surprise, by the way, right? That can happen when you're dealing with a massive development project. Yeah. But it's probably super hard to track this stuff down and kind of catch it before it actually gets to the live game. So I think they just need to, as much as I hate to say it, it's going to be a bit of a, you need to just fix it. Just fix it, forehead, right? You know, just fix the bugs. How hard can it be?
I think they've actually been pretty on point about that, though. Like, they're, like, since the big balance patch, it feels like they've already addressed most of them. I feel like they're pretty good with like, oh, we just put out a patch. Now there will be like 3 to 4 hot fixes throughout the week. There's just a couple that kind of get missed, right? Like everyone's talking about Hammer Spellbreaker or something. I don't even know what that bug is, but it just feels like everyone's talking about that one. But I don't know. I do think they're pretty on point with just like fixing the balance bugs pretty fast.
Yep. I will also say I think it's we don't feel it as much because Guild Wars 2 has like constantly live servers, right? Like the ability to be able to relog and then download the patch, but you also have the option to continue playing on your previous patch is really nice. I think people would be a lot more upset if we had to, like, let's say like 2 hours every night at 2 a.m. PST time or something like that. They like shut down the server so that they like re-put in all of like the fixes, like the patches and everything, and hotfix things that way. People would be so upset, right? Like especially people who like play during those hours would be completely destroyed by that. Whereas right now, I feel like the reason why we can kind of like laugh about these jokes is because like they get fixed at least somewhat quickly. I also think this is a lot on ArenaNet's side, like the fact that they've changed their public perception so quickly and so rapidly to where they have the trust of the player base now. Now we know if there's like some pretty game breaking bugs in there, like for example the tactical reload one on Bladesworn. I remember a lot of people in my community were just straight up like, yeah, I'm not playing until they fix that. But they fixed that within like a day or two, right? Whereas like I feel like in the past that probably would have sat there for weeks before they even got around to like fixing it. So I think there's a lot of trust involved now, and like the ability to fix it on the fly just makes people kind of see it as like, oh, it's just another meme, haha, silly ArenaNet doing ArenaNet things, like that sort of thing. So yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It is a good point about the perception, for sure. You know, and it is rapidly changing, and I hope it continues to go in this direction. Right, to be honest, because community good faith is very important, and you know we're getting there. We're getting there. People have embraced CMC.
It's really good at listening to feedback.
Yes.
People were really upset about. I think the biggest thing people were upset about was probably the Deadeye range, and then
they fixed it. It's gone.
Yeah,
just didn't put it in
like,
the game.
Okay, guess we'll not do that.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think we should almost maybe give them some more credit now. Like when there's a change, and like then people will get really upset about. Everyone's like, I'm quitting the game. And I'm like, this change might not even make it into the game because pretty much every time there's been huge uproar about something, it feels like they've been pretty solid about listening. Like, which ones have we had now? We've had like I guess Deadeye range. We've had like Scrapper changes. We had like the Mirage nerve and stuff. They've been genuinely really good at listening to like the community. Again, you gotta know when to listen and when not to listen though. You know, sometimes listening to community is a bad idea. But I think they've been really good about also just communicating and stuff about them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think being able to stick to their guns as a developer and, like say like, yeah, we have the internal metrics to show that this is not healthy for the game and therefore we think that this change is going to fix it. I mean, they did do that, right? Like with a couple of like the mech changes now like the Firebrand change, like a lot of people very, very vocally said like, yeah, I'm going to go play WoW instead because they're changing Firebrand and stuff. But even despite that, they knew that this would be healthier for the long-term vision of the game. So they stuck to it. So I think it's really, really nice. In a way, it's like not just balancing the game, but balancing ArenaNet too. So yeah, I'm honestly totally okay with the stuff that they've been doing. I do hope that eventually though that the meta kind of settles down, because even I myself, I'm a bit reluctant to learn some of like the new variants of the classes, especially if I already know like my current class is already very strong, so it doesn't really feel like there's that much point to learning something entirely new if it's just going to get reworked in a few weeks. So
Yes.
The opposite of this. I feel like I should stick to a class a little bit for a while and then try to get really good at it. But instead, I just play everything and then get like mediocre at it, and then I'll learn another one. So, jack of all trades, master of none. That's my playstyle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, you blast out the Power Herald.
True.
Jalice Power
yeah.
Herald. The Dwarf
Actually
Elite.
works really, really well. Like that was a good strat. You might have gotten us that skill if that's it, actually.
Yeah. Okay,
no,
it's
so good.
It is. It is so good.
Yeah, we've been running it for HTCM and literally half of our issues disappeared overnight. Like it's so good.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap things up, actually. That's a good place to end on the balance patch. It was an exciting patch. We're loving the feedback here. CMC is fully unchained, fully unleashed, buffing everything left and right, going crazy. And yeah, some great communication, some great responses, and I think the future is definitely looking good. If we can get another patch, it's the next patch. We've got to keep it going. I want to see the support patch. I want to see, this was the DPS patch, and then CMC is going to do the support patch and rework every support in the game in one go. Yes.
I want heal chrono. Give me heal chrono, please, CMC.
You can definitely get it. If Chaos trait line, like if they could probably give the Chaos boons AoE again. And then inspiration, a few changes there, heal chrono's on the menu. Yes. Yeah, I think that will actually round things out. That's TeaTime. We're back in business. TeaTime is back in the mix, gamers. And of course, thanks everyone for watching. And of course, it's time to sell out. Time to sell out, because why do we do TeaTime? Do we do it because we like the game? No. Do we do it because we actually like each other? Also no. Only reason is for the clout, it's for the clicks, it's for the views. And this is the time to get some of that. So, !hosts in the chat. You'll get links to everyone here. Should work anyway. And you should definitely follow everyone there. You should follow Lara. You should follow Emmy. You should go watch everywhere. You should be retweeting every social media post. You should be living on the edge trying to get those beautiful engagements there all over the place. But anyway, Sneb is not here, by the way, guys. Wait, it didn't get Emmy. Wait, what?
Oh,
hello?
What? How did it not get you?
I was the one who did the command too. I did
what? It didn't get you. How is that possible?
Sneb is on there, and I'm not there. And
Sneb's not even here. He's not.
Next
go
time
follow Sneb, everyone.
Yeah, like I told you, there's some shots fired here, right? There's some toxicity. The bot is disrespecting you. Doesn't even acknowledge you exist. Yeah. Like...
We literally had bets yesterday during my stream. They're like, "Do you think Teapot's gonna ask Emmy to be on TeaTime tomorrow morning, like 12 hours before it actually goes live?"
Yeah.
Next time you do that, I'm gonna say no, just for this.
Whoa! Okay.
Just for this.
Oh, man! Oh God, we have to edit this out. But anyway, Emmy, seeing as you have been ignored by the bot, please do the bot's job for it and tell us about where we can find you.
Madge. Okay, yeah. So hello everyone. My name is Emmy. I do a lot of endgame PvE shenanigans. So I do a lot of things that are community oriented. So I run a lot of trains, both for open world with like HV trains, map completion trains, meta trains, that sort of thing. And I also do a lot of training for things like strike missions, raids, fractals, that kind of stuff. So something that I've actually been doing recently a lot is I've been doing a lot of one-on-one sessions, especially with anyone that wants to learn the God class Mesmer. So if you ever want to learn how to play Condi Virtuoso, Power Virtuoso, any of the variants of Chrono or Mirage or anything like that, I've basically been hopping into Discord with people and kind of watching as you do it, and then providing pointers and kind of explaining the core class mechanics and where it really shines in like specific encounters and stuff. And yeah, so that's like kind of what I do. I actually am running a raid training in about an hour from now, so this is very good timing that we're calling it here. So yeah,
there it is. Okay, Lara, you are up next. Who are you?
Hey everyone, it's Durancy. Click my links. That makes me happy. I like attention. Actually, I'm gonna do a different shout out this time.
Oh.
So instead of plugging my Twitch, you should totally buy my game when that's done. Like that's a good one.
Ooh.
It's marketing. Like
Yeah.
I don't know when it's done, but you should totally buy it. I don't know, like a year, 2 years from now. That would be cool.
Yeah.
You
know, maybe
thanks for having me. Good time.
Guild Wars 2 streamers, maybe get some codes, you know? We're gonna get in there. I'll review the game No Mercy.
Oh god.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a whole podcast about why the balance.
Yeah,
is
it
like,
better have
you know.
challenge mode. Yeah. Like final boss too easy, you know, like way too easy. So it's 1 out of 10. Okay, no, obviously not. It's gonna be 10 out of 10, perfect game. You're gonna just put Su-1 in there, right? Dragon's End Unnerfed Edition. Is it just in there?
Sure,
somehow?
ArenaNet wouldn't mind. I'm sure
Yeah.
they wouldn't mind at all.
They'll give you a pass. They'll give you a pass. It's gonna be great. Yeah. But anyway, there we go. Check all that out. Follow Lara. Look, the Emmy link worked. I have no idea why it didn't appear the first time. It's here now. I actually didn't change anything. I just ran the command again, and boom, it fixed itself. We love to see that. So there they go. Check that out. Click on the links for Emmy. Click on the links for Lara. Okay. Yeah. Fortunately, you know, Emmy will now come on TeaTime again as the horrible act of it not working the first time has been righted. So our friendship is secure, at least for 1 more week, at least, apparently. But anyway, you should also follow this stream. There's loads of TeaTimes. And actually, if you like TeaTime, you should go and watch all of the other TeaTimes. I think there's like 400 TeaTimes at this point that you can watch.
God.
Wow. Wait, is it that many? No, it's not
Wait,
that many. It's not 400. It's more like
It's
200.
like 1
I think.
per week.
Yeah,
right?
so it's not
That'll be
that
like
many
8 years.
Yeah,
of
that-
free
yeah.
time.
Yeah. It's still a lot, though. I think it's over 200 at this point. Wow. That's quite a high amount. So you can go and watch all of them. You could just have them on a
What's
playlist.
your favorite TeaTime ever? Like, favorite episode?
That's a really good question.
Like, if people watch one TeaTime, which one should they watch?
That's a very good question. I'd actually have to think about that, I think. I'd have to really think about that.
Whichever one it is, make sure you link it because I want to see it.
Yeah.
Whichever
yeah.
one is the spiciest one, I want to see it.
There have been some pretty spicy TeaTimes. That is true. There have been a few TeaTimes that, you know, not all of them made it to YouTube. You know, some of them have been lost to time.
No.
Really?
Or at least a little bit. Yeah. I mean, well, you can wait. Is the Bagawan one here? Ah, yes. Here we go. If you want to see a spicy TeaTime, this is actually an unlisted illegal TeaTime. This is where Brazil, you can see Brazil argues with someone called Bagawan. Okay, they debate. You know, they debate big time. But anyway, I can't possibly pick a favorite because they're all so good and so interesting with loads of different people, loads of different ideas. I can't do that. What I can do is tell you to follow every single TeaTime host ever and follow all of my social media and also follow all of the host social media here, which is Lara, Emmy, and Sneb, even though Sneb was only here for like 2 minutes, because he broke his computer in pure rage, because that's how hard the new challenge mode was. He smashed it. He couldn't do it. But anyway, that's it, gamers. Thanks so much for watching. We really hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be right back in just a moment. But until next time, we are officially done with TeaTime. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next time. And yes, Nike saved ArenaNet from a reaming by not appearing on the episode.